I call to order the York County Regular School Board meeting for August 23rd, 2021. Summer break is winding down, and we are busy with the final preparations for our school year. I hope everyone has carved out some time to enjoy memorable family experiences over the past couple of months. It is the time of year when fall is around the corner with the promise of falling leaves and crisp mornings. Each new year brings with it fresh excitement as well as unique challenges, but we remain committed to moving forward with enthusiasm, providing meaningful learning experience for all students. And with that said, I would like to now read the mission statement of YCSD. The mission of the York County School Division is to engage all students in acquiring the skills and knowledge needed to make productive contributions in the world. Now, masks are not mandated in York County government buildings at this time. However, speakers may take the masks off if they wish so they can aid in the closed captioning for the television and YouTube stream. It's up to you. I would like to make an announcement regarding citizen comments this evening. All those wishing to address the board must sign up prior to the start of the business portion of the meeting. To ensure that staff members presenting tonight and all those wishing to make a public comment can be heard and are allotted their full time frame, no outbursts, applause, or other disruptions will be permitted during the meeting. Should this rule be disregarded, I will provide one warning, and any further disruptions will result in the room being cleared. Next, I would like to share some information about our pledge leader, Cassidy Reese, who is a 5th grade student at the best elementary school in York County, Coventry. Coventry Elementary School is proud to have Cassidy Reese represent us as the pledge leader this evening. Cassidy has attended Coventry since kindergarten and is a great representation of the traits that we want our Coventry Cougars to display. Cassidy embodies our positive behavior expectations, PAWS, positive, especially working hard and showing respect. She is a diligent student and is kind to all of her peers and teachers. Cassidy is a role model for other students and is always ready to offer assistance to others. Outside of school, Cassidy loves playing soccer with her friends, going to the beach, reading, and arts and crafts. Cassidy has a heart and a love for working with others, especially younger children. Cassidy's mom, a paraeducator also at Coventry, shared that Cassidy was extremely helpful with the younger children she babysat this summer. Cassidy's kindness and selflessness will be missed at Coventry as she goes to middle school next year, but we know her positive impact on others will remain a part of the Coventry community. Please stand as Cassidy leads us in our pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Cassidy. It's nice to have that back in person again. Moving on to our awards and recognitions, we have an introduction of some new staff. Dr. Shandor, I will let you introduce the newest staff members that are with us this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Higginbotham. Good evening, board members. I want to introduce and share a few comments relating to the newest additions to our YCSD leadership team, who are over here on the other side of the room. When I say your name, please stand and remain standing. So first we have Dr. Karen Cagle, Director of Curriculum and Instruction. Dr. Cagles previously served as principal at Grafton Middle School, Associate Director for K-12 Academic Services, and most recently as Associate Director of Educational Technology and Innovation. Next, we have Dr. Dave Reitz, Director of Leadership and Accountability. Dr. Reitz's new position transitioned from the Director of Elementary. Next, we have Ms. Holly Sheffield, York River Academy Principal. Ms. Sheffield joined the YCSD team in 2019 as an assistant principal at York High School. She previously served in various Virginia schools as a science teacher, a secondary school assistant principal, and a supervisor of student services, and an instructional specialist. Next, we have Mr. Stephen Gavin. Mr. Gavin is serving as Grafton High School's interim principal until further notice. He was previously the assistant principal at Grafton Middle School. Next, we have Miss Ann Shoemaker. Ms. Shoemaker began her career in education as a teacher at Greenwood Elementary School in Newport News. Since 2010, Ann has served as an elementary building administrator, and she'll be an assistant principal at Grafton Bethel Elementary School. Next, we have Amanda Shank. I hope I said your name right, Amanda. Ms. Shanks served as an elementary school teacher and an instructional coach with Henrico County Public Schools. Most recently, Amanda served as an elementary assistant principal in Orange County Public Schools. She will be an assistant principal at Magruder Elementary School. Next, we have Ms. Brittany West, Yorktown Elementary School assistant principal. Ms. West began her career in education as an elementary teacher in North Carolina with Edgecombe County Public Schools. Since joining YCSD in 2014, she has served as a fifth grade teacher and as an assessment and compliance coordinator. Next, we have Dr. Courtney Vander Linden. She will be an assistant principal at Grafton Middle School. Dr. Vander Linden previously served as an English instructional specialist in the Suffolk Public Schools and as an English teacher in Newport News and Suffolk School Divisions. Next, we have Ms. Cara Townsend, Tab Middle School assistant principal. Ms. Townsend began her career in education as a band director at Bruton High School in 2000. In 2020, she was promoted to a school improvement specialist in Williamsburg, James City County Public Schools. Next, we have Ms. Courtney Smith-Copeland, York High School assistant principal. Ms. Smith-Copeland began her education career as an English teacher at Dozier Middle School in Newport News. Since joining YCSD in 2014, Courtney has served as a middle school English teacher and most recently as an assessment and compliance coordinator. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to these YCSD members.
I look forward to hearing about the contributions and insight that these new and seasoned leaders will bring to our school division. Congratulations to each one of you. Next up, we have an award from the York Foundation for Public Education. Mr. Schaefer, I will let you share about this presentation.
Well, thank you. Ms. Christine Head, a YFPE member, will step forward to present a special gift from Cookie Text, an edible tweet, on behalf of the York Foundation for Public Education to our pledge leader, Cassidy Rees, who will also receive a Walmart gift card donated by a foundation supporter. Yes.
Now I will ask that Ms. Skinner come forward and share some information about the Creating Excellence Award.
Good evening, Chairman Higginbotham, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor. Tonight we have a special recognition, and I'd like to ask Christina Micah and Lynn Pitchford to please come forward. I am pleased to announce the Tab High Marketing Education Program as the Virginia Department of Education Region 2 winner of the 2021 Creating Excellence Program. The Creating Excellence Awards are presented annually to recognize exemplary programs in career and technical education. The marketing program at Tab High School provides students with a vertically articulated sequence of courses that integrate core academic concepts, authentic learning scenarios, and work-based learning experiences. Over the past 2 decades, more than 1,000 students have gained valuable work experience through TAB's cooperative education program. Learning extends beyond the classroom with opportunities to participate in DECA, a career and technical student organization that provides leadership development activities and competitive events. It is my pleasure this evening to present this award to our TAB marketing teachers, Christina Micah and Lynn Pinchford.
We will now begin the business portion of our meeting. Our first item is unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business from any member of the board? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to our presentations. Our first presentation is on the American Rescue Plan ESSER 3 grant. Dr. Shandor, I'll let you share about this topic.
Thank you, Mr. Higginbotham. Again, good evening, board members. This evening we have Dr. Vika Stevenson, who is our grant coordinator and writer. She will share a presentation related to the ESSER 3 grant. Dr. Stevenson.
Good evening, Chairman Higginbotham, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor. This evening, I have the pleasure of presenting to you the American Rescue Plan Act Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief ESSER 3 Fund. The purpose of the ESSER 3 Fund is to help safely reopen and sustain the safe operations of schools and address the impacts of COVID-19 on the nation's students by addressing students' academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs. As required by the ARP Act, divisions must develop an ESSER 3 plan that includes information on how the division will address mitigation and prevention strategies, consultation with stakeholders and opportunity for public comment, supports for unfinished learning, and supports for students' social, emotional, and mental health needs. This evening, I am very pleased to share with you that the York County School Division has been awarded over $5.2 million in ESSER 3 funds. On April 30th, the Virginia Department of Education announced the ESSER 3 awards to school divisions across the state of Virginia. This 3-year grant was awarded to school divisions based on their relative share of the Title I, Part A, Federal Fiscal Year 2020 funds. As required by the ESSER 3 guidelines, each school division must seek and take stakeholder input into account when developing the ESSER 3 plan. Additionally, it is required that a minimum of 20% of the total grant funds be reserved to address unfinished learning. As previously mentioned, the ESSER 3 grant guidelines require that school divisions seek and take stakeholder input into account when developing the ESSER 3 plan. From July 8th through July 15th, the York County School Division shared the YCSD ESSER 3 stakeholder survey on the division website for community feedback, and the survey results are posted on our division website. After the completion of the public comment period, SBO staff began reviewing the survey results in order to draft the proposed ESSER 3 plan. In early August, the proposed ESSER 3 plan was shared publicly on the division website, and tonight the board will vote on the proposed plan. On the next several slides, I will share a summary of the YCSD ESSER 3 stakeholder survey with you. There were 1,477 respondents to the survey. The survey asked each respondent to select all of the stakeholder categories that applied to them. 80% of the respondents identified themselves as parent and family members, while 17% of the respondents identified themselves as teachers. There were also smaller numbers of respondents who identified themselves as support staff, community members, students, and administrators. Additionally, survey respondents also represented students from diverse backgrounds, including those from the most vulnerable populations. The survey asked respondents to select up to 5 of the 15 ESSER 3 categories they felt were most important for the school division to fund. The top 5 responses were mental health supports, the purchase of educational technology, supporting school leaders and school needs, supporting unfinished learning, and improving air quality. Survey respondents were also asked to select the best ways for YCSD to support student learning from a list of options. Of the options provided, the following were the top 3: tutoring that is targeted and personalized, after-school enrichment programs, and summer enrichment programs. The survey provided respondents the opportunity to identify what they believe were the highest priority needs for the FY22 school year related to the ongoing impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. In rank order of highest to lowest priority, respondents indicated that addressing academic needs were the highest priority, followed by addressing the mental health, social needs, and emotional needs of our students. Another survey item asked respondents to select family engagement activities that they believe would provide information and assistance to families on how they can effectively support students' learning loss due to the ongoing impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. The top 5 choices were study skills and time management, social and emotional support, technology support, reading strategies at home, and math strategies at home. After careful review, of the stakeholder feedback survey, the YCSD ESSER 3 plan was developed. The following slides will provide you more information on the details of the proposed ESSER 3 plan. As per state guidelines, expenditures included in the ESSER 3 plan must adhere to a list of required and allowable uses of funds specified under Section 2001E of the ARP Act. Adhering to these guidelines and considering stakeholder feedback, we have developed the 3-year ESSER 3 plan to include 3 main categories. The first is addressing unfinished learning. The second is other uses of funds as defined by the ESSER 3 guidelines and prevention and mitigation strategies. I will provide further information on these categories in the following slides. Section 2001E of the ARP Act also requires each LEA to use a minimum of 20% of its formula funds to address the academic impact of unfinished learning through the implementation of evidence-based interventions. I would like to share just a few of these proposed expenditures included within the ESSER 3 plan to address unfinished learning. YCSD will use over $2.6 million of its ESSER funds to address unfinished learning and the ongoing impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. The ESSER 3 plan includes funding Summer Academy and additional supports during the summers of 2022 through 2024. Additional gifted staff will be hired to provide specialized gifted services and subject-specific enrichments to identified gifted students. To support unfinished learning in K through 8 reading, letters training and materials will be provided to cohort teachers, and e-tutoring opportunities will be provided to all students in grades 3 through 12. Additionally, the plan includes funding to address the continuity of learning, hiring an English language coach to provide supports to L teachers and students, and hiring an assessment, compliance, and intervention coordinator to provide supports to the Tiered Systems of Support RTI program as assigned. Again, these are just a few of the many ways that we plan to address unfinished learning through ESSER 3 funding. The ARP Act permits school divisions to use ESSER 3 funds that are not reserved to address unfinished learning to address the impacts of COVID-19 in a variety of ways. As I mentioned previously, stakeholder feedback and state guidance was utilized in developing the proposed expenditures, and I'd like to share just a few of these additional proposed expenditures included in the ESSER 3 plan. In accordance with ARP Act guidelines, YCSD will use over $2.1 million of its ESSER funds to address other significant areas of need. The ESSER 3 plan includes mental health and social and emotional professional development and training for all staff, as well as cognitive behavioral intervention professional development and training for select staff. The plan includes adding the Virginia Preschool Initiative Summer Academy to take place during the summer of 2022 through 2024. It includes hiring an additional speech-language pathologist to support assigned schools and hiring an assistive technology autism services improvement team coach who will provide support to self-contained classrooms. In order to sustain the Division 1-to-1 technology initiative that was implemented in the summer of 2020, the York County School Division will purchase technology to support daily instruction, including updates to hardware, software, and connectivity. Additionally, funding will be utilized to support division and school-based family and home partnerships, activities and initiatives geared towards student and family engagement in the community. The York County School Division will provide training and information and assistance to families on strategies for effectively supporting students in a variety of ways. Finally, in accordance with state guidelines, the York County School Division will set aside 2.6% of the total award amount for indirect costs. Again, these are just a few of the many ways that we plan to address other significant areas of need through ESSER 3 funds. ARP Act ESSER 3 funds may be used to implement prevention and mitigation strategies that are, to the greatest extent possible, consistent with the most recent CDC guidance on reopening schools, in order to continuously and safely open and operate schools for in-person learning. The ESSER 3 plan includes the following expenditures to address the proposed prevention and mitigation strategies. In the prevention and mitigation strategies category, the York County School Division will use approximately $420,000 to support the inspection, testing, maintenance, repair, replacement, and upgrade to select HVAC systems within the school division. These efforts are intended to improve the overall air quality in school facilities, including heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. YCSD will also purchase personal protective equipment and supplies to sanitize and clean school buildings and offices in accordance with CDC operational strategy for K-12 schools through phase prevention. As next steps, following board approval, we will submit the plan to the Virginia Department of Education by September 1st and begin implementing the YCSD ESSER 3 plan. Finally, we will conduct periodic review of the implementation of the plan and provide these updates to the board and to the community. At this time, I am pleased to answer your questions related to the division's ESSER 3 plan.
First and foremost, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's $5.2 million is significant, so my hat's off to you and the team. I have one ask real quick. As we begin to execute, it's 5.2 over 3 years, which is, again, significant. I just ask that when we look at those tasks and we begin to decompose them down to objectives, that they're measurable, collectible, and relevant,
Yes, sir.
and that we do take the measures of effectiveness to demonstrate how we're doing and progressing.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I have just one quick one. Since it is a 3-year plan, if things change, year 1 to 2 or 2 to 3, is there wiggle room in there that we can reallocate funds to different things if we see that they are needed more?
Yes, absolutely. We are permitted to make amendments to the grant as we as a division see necessary. Again, if any of those changes might occur, we would present that to the board for approval.
Go ahead.
My question was just for the English language coach and the ACIC position. Are those school-based or school board office-based positions?
They would be, the English language coach would be a division level coach supporting multiple schools. The ACI would be a building-specific position.
So how does it work when you have a grant to cover a position for a number of years, and then when those years are over, that person then goes away? I mean,
Yes.
okay, all right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stevens.
Our next presentation is on the 2021-22 school year planning. Dr. Shander, I'll let you share some information.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Higginbotham. Dr. Jim Carroll is now Chief Operations Officer, is going to give the board an update on the current COVID-19 metrics and other pertinent details related to the school year. Dr. Carroll.
Just a second, I'll be right with you. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Shandor, Chairman Higginbotham, members of the board. You have asked tonight that I come to you and give you an update on the COVID status in our community, and so we will get going. So unfortunately, we've been having trouble with the VDH dashboard, and so it was not operating very well earlier today. But I was able to pull, instead of school demographics, York County locality statistics. You'll remember that the CDC case rate for determining the rate of transmission is over 7 days, and that the criteria for high transmission is at 100. You'll see on this screen that the number 29.5, that is the average for the last 7 days. And so you multiply that by 7 and you get 206.5. So that puts us about double over the high criteria set by the CDC. You'll remember some of these numbers from last meeting where we shared with you vaccination rates in the county. And so we'll look at the top left corner. I'll direct your attention there. So when we look at our 12 to 15-year-olds, and there's no guarantee all of these students are ours, but it should be reasonably close. When we look at the students that are fully vaccinated, you'll see now we're at a full third, but students who have had one dose is at 45.5%. Now, I've been tracking these numbers since July 27th. They don't give you a longitudinal graph yet. but that represents an 8.1% increase over almost a month. So we are incrementally climbing that ladder. And then when we look at our 16 to 17-year-olds, you'll see that we are at 43.7% fully vaccinated. The one-dose number is over half of of that age group, which is at 55.8%. And both of those numbers represent about a 6% increase in that same time period. Now, I will remind you, when we're dealing with the 17-year-olds, some of those are probably still students that are leaving for college, so those numbers are certainly lower than that, but it gives us some idea, and it's the best data that we have. Finally, if you look at the bottom left, you see the 18 and over number, and that too has been incrementally changing. We've increased from 54% first doses to 67.8 in the same time period, and the fully vaccinated group sits at 61.5. So we are making progress there. We also have some breaking vaccination news. If you haven't been near the news today, the FDA did remove the emergency authorization status off of the Pfizer vaccination. So that is now fully authorized for people that are 16 years and over. Now, you'll remember Pfizer can be administered to people as young as 12 years old, but that's still on an emergency authorization. But 16 and over is now fully authorized. And there are, of course, we don't know the percentage, but there are some in the community that have been waiting for this action in order to make a decision whether they were going to get a vaccination or not. So that should have some marginal improvement in our 16 and over crowd. And now I wanted to revisit the quarantine guidance. That you'll remember that staff's recommendation before you last month was predicated on what would happen with quarantines with students. So I just wanted to, we shared a lot of data, we had graphics, and we were trying to sort out different scenarios for you. But now that we are operating under the public health order for the time being, and since everybody would be masked, that means that the school exception to quarantining would be in place. I want to be really clear that under those parameters, the only students that would be quarantining would be the following. First, students that spend more than 15 minutes within 3 feet of a positive student, and 15 minutes or more, and being unvaccinated. So that would be the criteria for deciding whether we were quarantining an individual. And then the other ones would be a positive individual who was vaccinated but also symptomatic. All right? And I explain that to you because I want to make sure that we're clear on the expectations, because we're operating under different rules than we were last year. So positive students and others that will be in quarantine will be able to get their schoolwork from the Canvas learning management system and access that schoolwork daily. Accessing it will daily will count for registering their attendance. Now, this is only for the students that are isolated or quarantined, no others. And there is no expectation for concurrent instruction this year from our teachers. And exceptional students, of course, will work with their case managers to make sure that everything is working for them and that they're accessing learning. This concludes my report at this time. I'll welcome any questions you have.
Yeah, so what is our percentage of staff that are vaccinated? Do you have that number offhand?
We don't have an exact number because we have, of course, had some attrition over the summer. You'll remember that we had, from the percentages that we knew from people who were signing up through us in the initial shot clinics, we were somewhere in the 80 to 85% range, I believe, for all of our staff, but we were just over 90% for school-based staff. We don't know, it could be better, it could be worse, it could be about the same. So we're probably roughly 90% still school-based staff.
And are we still going to have the same contact tracing personnel and procedures in place that we had last year, even though things have changed a little bit as far as quarantining?
Yeah, yes, we are. We will be relying a little more on the school-based staff to help us out because we do expect there to be a higher volume at the secondary schools. But at elementary, it should be pretty good because everybody's masked at this time. And then the same personnel are up in the county office to administrate that and support the schools.
And then my other question was about when we're quarantining. I know we've told our staff we're not doing any concurrent teaching, but I know we have the ability for our teachers to record lessons if they wish to do that. So we might actually have some teachers who are going to record a lesson and post that to Canvas.
That's correct.
Or they might even feel like they could do a Teams meeting if they felt that was necessary, but we're not telling them that they have to
Yeah,
do
right.
that.
We're not setting the expectation.
Okay, right, thank you.
I have a quick question. You were talking about the vaccination percentages. Has there been any discussion with York County with the possibility of a plan for booster shots if they become available?
Yes, once we got that news last week, we started discussions both with a supplier and with the county. And so we're working for something early October to offer to our staff, probably working with York County and their staff, and then anything that would be left over, we could open up for public also.
Just a comment that after we made the motions about masks being optional, the health commissioner issued an order which made our motion kind of a moot point. But all the board members were contacted individually, and we all agreed we'd have to follow the order in lieu of getting arrested for a Class 1 misdemeanor. But just to make it formal, I guess, I should make a motion to rescind the August 4th, 21 motion as amended that previously was adopted by the board on the mask policy.
Okay. So to read that policy, just to make sure we understand, what we adopted was to begin the school year with masks optional for everyone while inside York County School Division buildings, and masks are required while students and staffs are on buses. Masks are not required while eating, during recess, or when people are outdoors.
That was the motion, correct.
Okay.
I'm asking to be rescinded, correct.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion from the board? Okay, Ms. Ford, we have a motion and a second. You may pull the board.
Yes, a motion was made by Mr. Richardson and seconded by Mr. Myatt to approve the motion to rescind the August 4th, 2021 motion as amended that was previously adopted by the board to begin the school year with mask optional for everyone while inside York County School Division buildings, and masks are required while students and staff are on school buses. Masks are not required while eating during recess or when people are outdoors. Mrs. Graltz?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Myatt?
Yes.
Mr. Richardson?
Yes.
Mr. Higginbotham?
Yes.
The motion passed 5-0 to rescind the motion. Thank you.
And we can revisit this issue when the current order expires.
Wonderful.
This is not time for public comment, sir. Okay, you can address the board during the public comment. Our next presentation is on cultural responsive teaching and social and emotional learning. Dr. Shandor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Higginbotham. So next, Dr. Carroll is going to lead off this next presentation. He's going to be joined by Ms. Candy Skinner, our Chief Academic Officer, as well as Dr. Tony Vladu, our Chief Human Resource Officer, and they're going to present information related to cultural responsive teaching and social and emotional learning. Dr. Carroll.
Thank you, Dr. Shandor. All right. Board members, you will recall that we have periodically given you updates on both our equity work and culturally responsive teaching work over the entirety of the last 9 years. It's been part of our previous 2 strategic plans, and we've presented to you and to previous boards. As recently as last spring, you received the same from Ms. Katie Gaylord and from Dr. Aaron Butler, as well as an update on the direction we've been moving with the social emotional learning, otherwise known as SEL. Since those updates, there has been a lot of discussion in the news about concerns raised by some about the content or political agendas involved in the work covered by these 2 areas. Tonight, we will revisit these areas so that you are confident of the work that we are doing and that our community is crystal clear on our direction and intent. As is always our purpose, we will present to you in the clearest way possible the actions we are taking or in the planning stages of. In the actions that we share tonight that are in the planning stages, it's important to note that the board will have approval opportunities before those plans go into motion. Tonight, I'll start the presentation discussing equity, school culture, student behavior work, and efforts with culturally responsive teaching. Much of it you'll remember from those presentations I mentioned just before. Ms. Skinner will then present our work with social emotional learning, including upcoming standards work that will need to come before you later for approval. And Dr. Vladu will discuss revised teacher evaluation standards, which will also require board approval. Before we start, though, I'd like to bring the board and public's attention to one of your current policies, an important policy of yours that all involved in the current public discourse need to understand. Policy INB is a policy that you have that governs much of what you're seeing in the national news coverage. It was adopted in 2013 and was restated again in 2017. And that policy provides for a few things. First, it recognizes that effective citizenship is a major purpose of education. And it also recognizes that preparation for effective citizenship includes study of controversial issues. But the most important part of that policy is explained in the third bullet. It sets an expectation for the learning environments that we provide. And I quote directly from the policy here, where each student can study the issues within a curriculum in an atmosphere free from bias, prejudice, or coercion that is appropriate for the student's grade level. I share this because this summer there have been baseless public accusations circulating locally that YCSD has been teaching critical race theory, and I am here to state emphatically that we are not. Critical race theory is a theoretical construct appropriate for courses at the graduate level in a university setting. It is not appropriate for a K-12 setting. Therefore, teaching this theory would be in violation of policy INB on the grade level appropriateness alone. However, as long as it's in the news as a current event and is readily seen in the news, it could possibly be studied in the context of a controversial issue, as long as that issue was studied within the parameters of the third bullet found here. I would add, as always, if there is any suspected violation of board policy, it should be reported to the school principal so that it can be investigated and addressed. So now I'll move on to equity updates. Over the past 4 years, Strategic Plan 4 has focused on school culture with a focus on program, protocols, and activities related to reducing exclusionary discipline practices, providing evidence-based professional development to foster respect for all students and families, and providing culturally based learning opportunities for our students. In the next few slides, I'll provide a review of division actions related to these objectives. So to those ends, for the past 3 years, the division has expanded its scope with the Virginia Tiered System of Supports Framework, otherwise known as VTSS. The VTSS framework provides school divisions with a framework that aligns academic, behavior, and social emotional wellness practices to support student learning and achievement in a safe and welcoming environment in order to meet the needs of all of our learners. Under the VTSS umbrella, the culturally responsive domain focuses on integrating school-based and division-wide practices to support students through integrating student voice in a supportive and caring school environment. As you can see from the graphic, school-based teams develop school identity and expectation charts to ensure students could learn in a disruption-free and appropriate environment with positive behavior systems. In reference to Objective 4.4, school-based staff receive training on positive behavior intervention systems and restorative approaches to discipline that help correct behaviors in a supportive environment. To assist schools in this area, the division provided several tools and data measures to enable school-based teams to make data-driven decisions related to fostering positive school climate and eliminating disparities. Staff have been given the opportunity to participate in a variety of evidence-based professional development trainings provided through various agencies like the Virginia Department of Education, the Training and Technical Assistance Center that you know as TTAC at the College of William & Mary, the William & Mary College of Education, the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice, and the Colonial Behavioral Health Organization. Trainings included topics such as trauma-informed care, mindfulness or stress reduction, bullying prevention, mental health first aid, and positive behavior intervention systems. And you know that as PBIS. Students were also provided opportunities to engage in cultural learning through the use of diverse reading materials, access to primary source documents, and web-based resources, and school-based celebrations that honored the diversity of our students and families. That completes my section of the presentation, and I welcome any of your questions, and Dr. Butler is also here to assist with any details.
So, Dr. Carroll, I appreciate all your work you've done on this, and people that call me, I try to explain that we don't teach critical race theory, and I don't know where the disconnect is coming and where they're hearing that we do or we don't. I've challenged many people to show me a curriculum, show me a lesson plan, show me what we're teaching, because I can't find it. I haven't seen anything, and I've asked a lot of questions, I know, about that because it's been a hot topic. But I appreciate everything you've done, and especially your great presentation. I think you spelled it out very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just going to real quick express my gratitude, not only division leadership, but to the previous board also. Thinking strategically, maintaining awareness across the diversity dynamic, as well as a need to assure for cultural diversity, but also engaging in organizational change while thinking strategically and also executing those change management practices that have us here today, I think well positioned to take a very close look at perhaps what VDOE has articulated or laid out, and then to do that in a very deliberate way. And we've got a proven process to do that. And I'm quite comfortable, as Mr. Richardson said, with where we are and how we proceed to, continue to implement and do what's best for our learners. So thank you.
Okay, all right. We'll just go down the line, okay? Yes, Dr. Carroll, I thank you for all this, and one of the things that I'm especially thankful for is for the youth mental health first aid, because this last year has been very tough on the kids, and coming back is going to be great, but they could have some adjustment problems, and so I think this would address it. And I thank you for saying that there's no critical race theory being taught in York County and won't be. And I definitely appreciate all the effort that we're putting in to take care of kids and meet them culturally where they're at so that we can give every child the education that they need to have. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Skinner will go a little deeper into the social emotional piece.
I'm good.
I just want to make sure I understand. So culturally responsive teaching has the same initials as CRT, but they are not the same thing. Culturally responsive teaching is making sure that there are diverse materials so students see themselves in the curriculum. It's not talking about differences in anything. It's so that we bring the diversity together in the classroom, correct?
I think the biggest or the broadest way to explain it is that what you're dealing with is treating diversity as value added as opposed to a deficit. And you're just bringing more to the classroom and building on that. And so you want teachers that are culturally competent to be able to bring that out. And it does, unfortunately, share 3 letters with something else that's become controversial And that's unfortunate. Maybe there'll be a change in that terminology soon, because we always change terms in education to get away from that piece of the controversy. But it's about treating all of our people well in a safe environment and, as I said, value added.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from the board?
I would just like to add what you're talking about, the cultural training that our teachers have to have this year. I've taken it online, and that's exactly what it is. It's very, very simple and short and sweet to the point. Nothing to do with critical race theory at all.
And Dr. Vladu, in his section, will address that also.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Good evening. As Dr. Carroll shared, my portion of the presentation will focus on the work our school division has been doing to support the social, emotional learning of our students and the next steps for addressing the SEL standards that were recently adopted by the Virginia Board of Education. The VDOE defines social emotional learning as the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge and skills and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions and achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. In 2017, members of our school division and our community collaboratively developed our current strategic plan. The mission is focused on positive student outcomes centered around a common set of beliefs. Many of these beliefs focus on supporting student wellness and continued growth. Over the last 4 years, our school division has focused on developing structures and programs that provide our students and our families with the social and emotional resources and support they need to ensure that their students reach their fullest potential. As Dr. Carroll highlighted earlier, Goal 4 of the strategic plan focuses on school culture and our commitment to promoting positive relationships between and among staff, students, and families. Over the past 4 years, our team has worked to ensure we are meeting this goal. In 2017, the school division's convocation focused on mental health and wellness of students and staff. In 2017 to 2018, the school division expanded its tiered framework to implement positive behavioral interventions and supports for students. In 2019, the Student Services team led a situational analysis using one of our Trago Ed processes to review current practices to support students' mental wellness in the division. Since then, the division has focused on incorporating social emotional wellness and mental health supports into the VTSS model. This slide shows a tiered instructional model that lists much of the structures we have in place to support social and emotional wellness in our school division. Tier 1 prevention practices, which are marked in green, are in place for all students. These strategies are intended to provide a safe and a caring learning environment that allows students to focus on their academics. An example of a Tier 1 strategy would be elementary school counselor lessons that are centered around topics like character education and anti-bullying. The DARE program is another example of a Tier 1 strategy. For some students, additional supports are required at the Tier 2 level, which you see here marked in yellow. These supports are typically provided one-to-one or in a small group setting. Examples of a Tier 2 strategy may include attendance plans, student success plans, and mentorship programs. Many of these interventions were implemented during the pandemic when students' social, emotional, and mental health needs increased. Providing these interventions demonstrated to our families and students that our teachers, administrators, and counselors were there to support a family's needs so students could focus on learning. A few students need the most intensive supports to reach a readiness for learning. These needs must be addressed through careful consideration in collaboration with family members and outside agencies. School social workers, counselors, and school psychologists all are heavily involved in providing Tier 3 supports to students, which may include making referrals to outside mental health providers, developing individualized behavior intervention plans, and crisis intervention, including suicide risk assessments and threat assessments. In order to expand our Tier 1 strategies, which I shared that are marked in green, members of our VTSS team have been working to develop a shared understanding of social emotional learning and the skill set students need in order to be successful. Based on suggested guidance from VDOE at that time, the division utilized the 2017 CASEL framework as a foundation for that work. According to VDOE, the SEL skills that are taught and infused in effective teaching practices also embody the 5 C's, the profile of a Virginia graduate, and the 21st century workplace readiness skills that prepare all students with the knowledge and skills required to be college and career ready. To support our students last year, our counselors worked to help build capacity around these skill sets and continue to support students during their counselor-led lessons, while teachers provided opportunities for students to foster their skill development. The VTSS team continued to review student needs and provided additional supports throughout the school year. Since the start of our work, the VDOE has since provided additional guidance around SEL. In July, the Virginia Board of Education approved a uniform definition of social emotional learning, as well as the Virginia Guidance SEL standards for grades kindergarten through grade 12. Now I'd like to bring your attention to the information within this highlighted box. It is important to note that VDOE provides each school division with the flexibility around the Virginia Guidance standards. Local school boards may choose to adopt all or portions of these standards as part of their own local policies. School divisions also have the flexibility to use them as guidance as they implement SEL programs based on the needs of their community. As we consider these options proposed by VDOE, it is important to consider the feedback we have received from our families as well as our students and staff. Earlier this evening, Dr. Stevenson shared ESSER community feedback as part of her presentation. Mental health and social emotional wellness were identified as top categories for funding and prioritizing by our staff and community. As we plan for our next steps, it's important that we review any feedback our students provide to us. For example, York County Middle School students who participated in the Virginia Secondary School Climate Survey last year provided feedback on a variety of topics related to school climate and safety. While much of the feedback was positive, students did indicate a need for continued support in such areas as managing emotions and resolving conflicts with others. This type of data, as well as our parent and community feedback, assists us with making sure we're taking the right steps to provide our students with social emotional wellness. While the Board of Education has provided each division with flexibility in how they approach the new standards, we feel it is important to make parents a part of our decision-making process. That being said, we are planning to bring together a committee of school and community stakeholders to work collectively to develop a recommendation for a YCSD social emotional framework, which would include specific SEL standards as well as a plan for implementation. This committee will work with division leaders to review the Virginia Guidance SEL standards and resources. Additionally, the team will review division needs by looking at a variety of student data and survey feedback. The team will bring the proposal to the board for approval during the May 2022 school board meeting. If requested, the team can also provide ongoing updates on the committee's progress during the school year. Knowing that our families have varying opinions regarding the topic of social emotional learning, the committee could consider modeling this process after our Family Life program, where we provide families with an opportunity to review curriculum and lessons while allowing family choice when it comes to participation. As the committee works As the committee works through this process, we will continue to train staff on those VTSS strategies and practices that we shared earlier. And we will also continue to collect data, division data, and discuss division and school-specific needs within the VTSS model. So this concludes my portion of the presentation. In a few moments, I'll turn this over to Dr. Vladu, but I'd like to take a moment to see if you have any questions for me.
Mine was more of a comment. I know we had a speaker at our last meeting that was saying, 2 meetings ago, last year, I don't even know at this point, that was talking about, my child, we talk about feelings at home, we do all of these things at home, we don't need them to learn them at school. And we know that that's not the case for every child or every family. So offering that opt-out, I think, is a great idea. It does give families a choice. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Ms.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thus far, our presenters have shared with you the responsibilities and the processes needed to support our students so they may learn. At this time, I would like to provide insight into the standards that guide the work of teachers. So this past January, the General Assembly passed House Bill 1904 and Senate Bill 1196, which required the Virginia Board of Education to include cultural competency in the teacher evaluation standards. These bills also require staff that are licensed by the state to complete cultural competency training. In March, the Virginia Department of Education revised the Uniform Performance Standards, which are used to reflect on the teaching practice and its impact on students. These standards are used to evaluate teachers across the Commonwealth. To support the implementation of these standards and based on recommendations from the Committee for Equity and Diversity, starting this fall, the school division added cultural competence to its required annual training. I want to emphasize, though we're required to implement these standards, the school division reserves the right to select its own training materials. To date, as it relates to the 2021 Uniform Performance Standards, the division does not require teachers and staff to use the VDOE video regarding these standards or for training purposes. The last time the Uniform Performance Standards were updated was back in 2011. At that time, the school division convened a committee of teachers and other stakeholders to update the teacher evaluation handbook as well as other evaluative documents. During this process, the school board was provided with updates and it voted to approve the teacher evaluation handbook. Similarly, training on the changes to the standards was provided to teachers and other stakeholders to support implementation. As the new standards are for implementation this coming up school year or the 2022-2023 school year, the division will follow a similar process beginning this fall through committee work and provide updates to the school board. The evaluation handbooks are expected to come before you this upcoming spring. This concludes my portion of the presentation. At this time, I will take any questions or comments that you might have.
Thank you very much.
Good job, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ledu. That concludes our presentation on that topic.
Okay. So we'll move on to capital projects report. Dr. Shandor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Higginbotham. Next, we're going to bring up Mr. Mark Shearhart, Associate Director for Capital Plans. He is going to present this month's capital projects report. Mr. Shearhart.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor. Here's your capital projects report for the month of August. I'll touch on several projects this evening. The first of these are at Bruton High School. This is the Learning Commons and the School of the Arts restroom renovations. So the project does include renovating the existing library and the restrooms near the School of the Arts area of the building. So the project completion is behind due to material delays. We've had issues trying to get ceramic tile, et cetera. And I'll talk about more material delays as I go through the presentation. The HVAC ductwork is almost complete, and the lighting is being installed in all the areas. The furniture delivery has been delayed. Again, this is another delay thing. We're waiting for fabric to be manufactured for the furniture. And we're also waiting on ceramic tile to be delivered. This is a picture of one of the collaboration spaces in the new Learning Commons. And you can see here the architect brought in a green color and then tied it into the floor here. This is revolving around the school colors of the green and gold at Bruton High School. And so she made several different shades of green and yellow here. This is a picture taken from the large area at the Learning Commons into the new classroom there. We took out a wall, put in these glass walls here and these glass sliding doors. There will be tiered seating in this cafeteria, this classroom once it's completed, be tiered seating in there. I took this picture standing at the door of the librarian's office, looking out into the Learning Commons proper. And if you look straight underneath that A-frame ladder there, that's the front door of the library. We took out the existing door and put in some glass there and a glass door to open it up. As people walk by, they can look into the Learning Commons. And you see on the left-hand side here, there are several different shades of yellow and green, and these areas are the three collaboration spaces on that side. And on the left-hand side, or right-hand side of the picture is another fourth collaboration space. I just want to note that this picture here is taken with no lights turned on, except for the lights in the collaboration space. This entire area is lit by solar tube lighting through the roof right now. And we don't have any lights in this area turned on. So it's that bright in there. We have dampers in there so we can even tone that lighting down if we need to from the daylight. This is one of the restrooms that's near the School of the Arts. And we've had this cement board, the contractors had the cement board on the walls there probably for 3 weeks now, waiting for the ceramic tile. I got word this afternoon that they received the wrong ceramic tile. So now they've reordered the proper ceramic tile, and they plan to start installing the ceramic tile this week. The next project is the York High School. This is a roof repair and coating. And again, this project start was delayed due to material delays. They have been working on the roof on blisters, repairing those blisters, and they also began coating the roof in several areas. The roof insulation, now we're being told, will not arrive until February. So that will delay some major repairs to the roof where they need to tear off the entire roof on certain locations and replace that. And so those areas will be having to be delayed until September of 2022, excuse me. The project will stop in this fall of 2021 and then start up again in the spring of 2022. And this is due to the weather. The coating that we're putting on the roof cannot be applied when the roof is wet or when the roof is colder than 60 degrees. So here's a picture of part of the roof at York High School. You can see here where they took off the blisters, and the blisters are the layers of roof here, and what happens is moisture gets between those layers, and as the sun shines on it, it just expands. The vapor barrier there expands, and the top layers of the roof come loose, and the contractor tears off those top layers of roof and puts down new roofing material there, and then coats over the top of it when they get done with the repairs. This is a picture of part of the roof that's already been coated at York High School. Seaford Elementary School, this is a renovation and additions there. Again, this has been delayed due to COVID. We anticipate taking this out to bid next year, 2022. And we do anticipate the classroom addition starting by May of 2022 and then completing by May of 2023. The bus loop there, which is desperately needed, and additional vehicle parking will also take place in the summer of 2023. So the last two projects I'm going to touch on are Tabb Middle and York Middle School. These are the gym renovations there. The painting is complete in all 3 gyms. The lighting is complete in all 3 gyms. And the wood floors have been installed at all 3 gyms. They're in the process of being sanded and finished now. The line and logo, after they're finished, the line and logo painting will be done, and then they'll refinish them again to seal in the paint lines. All 3 gyms will not be completed by the start of school. Again, this was because of the delay of receiving the plywood that goes underneath the maple floor. They had the maple floor in stock, but they could not get the plywood, and that was in short supply nationwide right in the middle of this summer when we needed to put the floors in. So here's a picture of the Tabb Middle School main gym. This is after the painting was done. You see we put a little extra pop in the ceiling there by painting the ductwork orange. And the wood floor is actually in place here, but it's kind of washed out in the picture because of how light it is. And here's a picture of the auxiliary gym there as well. You can see the wood floors in place. And again, we did a full color painting in there and made the pop with the ductwork again. This is York Middle's main gym, and you can see here the painting is complete there, lights in the floor. And I took this picture just to show you a little bit of what it's going to look like. On the left-hand side, the floor, the maple floor, is not sanded and no polyurethane has been applied. On the right-hand side, it has a first coat of polyurethane. They sanded this area here. This is where the bleachers go. They sanded this area with a small sander, and they put down 4 coats of polyurethane before they move the bleachers back into place and fasten them to the wall. And then they sand the rest of the floor and begin the rest of the work in the rest of the gym, which will start tomorrow at Tabb Middle. And that's my last picture for this evening. Do you have any questions for me?
I always look forward to your pictures. They're great.
Yeah, that looks good.
So will the sanding all be done by the time school starts? On those floors, do you know?
I think it should be very, very close. We expected about a day and a half per gym. Well, about a day and a half per gym, so York Middle may be done next week after while school's in session. We painted the gyms during school, and we used installed exhaust fans at Tabb Middle School, and we had an exhaust fan installed at York Middle School, and it didn't bother the students at all. There was no fumes in the building, so it worked out great. So we don't expect any problems with the sanding or with the finishing of the floors.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mark, I went to Bruton today, as a matter of fact, and saw all the progress and everything. And in the Learning Commons, it looks very nice. And I go, oh, we aren't going to hit August 30th, are we? and then Arletha told me, no, it's going to be November. And I go, I was hoping against hope. But yeah, I mean, these delays are everywhere. So, I mean, I'm going to be surprised even on November, actually. But the restrooms are going to look nice. She told me about the tile, and I go, anything's better than an old painted concrete block, you know? But it is looking good.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shearhart.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Shearhart.
you. Our final presentation for tonight is the staffing report. Dr. Shandor.
Thank you, Mr. Higginbotham, and again, good evening, board members. Next, we're going to have Dr. Tony Vladu, Chief Human Resource Officer. He's going to share a staffing report. Dr. Vladu.
Mr. Higginbotham, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor, thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on staffing. As you'll remember, I provided a similar report during the last board meeting on August 4th. First, I would like to begin by sharing an update on licensed positions. At the elementary level, as of August 3rd, we have 5 classroom teacher vacancies. Since the last report, we hired 3 teachers. However, due to a rise in student enrollment, we released 2 new positions that were previously on hold, which contributes to the 5. We're also hiring 4 special education positions, 1 school counselor, 1 English learner or ESL teacher, and 1 library media specialist. On this slide, I would like to share staffing levels at the secondary level. As you can see, as of today, we have 3 Spanish and 3 science teachers or vacancies open. Also, we have 2 special education, 2 English, 2 ESL or English learner teachers, 1 French, 1 math, 1 art, 1 history, and 1 reading specialist position that are still vacant. We're also hiring for other licensed positions at the secondary level, which include 5 newly budgeted positions, such as the school psychologist, 2 board-certified assistant behavior analysts, and 1 social worker. Lastly, we're in the process of filling the 1 instructional and innovation coach, as well as a math coach position. At this time, I would like to share an update on our non-licensed positions. Since I presented at the August 4th meeting, the majority of general education para-educator positions have been filled. However, we continue to have 28 special education and ESL or EL-related positions that we're currently working to staff. It is important to recognize that in prior years, we have an average of about 30 vacancies for paraeducators at this time, so we're a little higher. As you can see, we're also working to fill 3 oral communications facilitators and 1 occupational therapist position. On this slide, I would like to share many of the mission-critical positions that support teaching and learning. Since I reported back on August 4th, we received 9 additional bus driver resignations, which has resulted in 24 total vacancies. As shortages we have been reported in both the local and national media, we do have 5 positions in the pipeline that we're currently working to fill, or at least there are active offers and acceptances on the table. As I shared last time, we have a number of custodial positions, about 18, that we're working to fill. Again, on average, we have about 14 custodial positions at this time of the year. Actually, last year, those positions remained open throughout the year, and we are contracting with an external company to fill that need. We're also hiring 4 maintenance and warehouse positions, 3 office and clerical, 3 IT positions, 2 crossing guards, 2 cafeteria monitors, and 2 bus driver assistant positions. At this time, I would like to highlight some of our next steps or continued steps. We'll continue to advertise on TV and social media. We'll continue to have additional job fairs this fall for both all positions as well as transportation specific. We're reaching out to colleges for recent graduates, and we're able to land at least 1, but we're working to land more teachers and other staff from college programs. I also want to thank the board for approving several incentives for transportation. As you'll remember, if an employee, YC as the employee, makes a referral, he or she can get a bonus for a bus driver position. And at the last board meeting, you approved the recruiting bonus for bus drivers and bus driver assistants. And again, we're getting that information out to our staff. I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide this update. And at this time, I'll take any questions or comments that you might have.
You know, Dr. Vlad, I noticed on the secondary side, with regard to teachers as well as the specialists, almost no movement since early this month. How about the pipelines? Is there any movement in the pipelines, or from a sourcing standpoint, or are you?
Yes, certainly, that's a great question. So our pipeline right now is limited primarily to new grads and primarily to individuals that move into the area. As per the state code, we cannot take from any other school division after July 15, or Region 2 is actually July 15. The code is June 30th. And so our pipeline is limited, but we're not alone in this position. As I talk with my neighbors and my colleagues, they're having significant difficulties themselves. We're really all competing for the same pool of candidates.
And have we used in the past a third-party vendor to help recruit? Is that something, you know, that's common in industry, but is it anything we've used before, Dr. Shandor, that you know of?
I don't believe we've used a third-party vendor to recruit.
I don't know if it's viable. It's expensive, but from a specialist standpoint, all right. Just
We
to-
are having some preliminary looks, but Code of Virginia is very specific on that, they're required to meet the exact same standards if the school board were to hire them. So certainly there are companies out there that provide staffing. We're really exploring that very, very heavily for these courses. However, there are a lot of legal hurdles to jump through. So again, it is on the table and we're working from that angle.
But, but regulatory constraints. Okay, all right, thank you. Thanks.
How are we sitting on substitutes? Because obviously, we're going to have to use substitutes to fill some of these vacancies as we move forward. Are we sitting pretty?
We have 271 active subs, so we're only counting the folks that have been in our schools for 5 days or more. They're there. They love to work in person. Some of the difficulties we had, that's often our substitute did not know what it looked like to teach remotely, but the moment we open in person, our floodgates are open. They're willing to come back, willing to work, and actually, we're about 10% higher in our fill rates than the national average. So again, kudos to our subs that continue to help us out during this difficult time of staffing our schools.
And obviously, you've got December grads that you can recruit at some point, but we'd have to get to that point, so
Certainly.
that's great. Some good news.
One more, Dr. Vladu. I saw a little spike in bus drivers over the last 30 days. Any particular reason, you know?
We are keeping track. We do ask on the exit the reason they're leaving. They're not required to provide that. Some of them are family obligations, a big one right now. And then a handful, very, very tiny, have left for employment elsewhere, but not many. And several did not share the reason why they were leaving. So we're continuing to monitor the reason for, not just for bus drivers, but for all positions, because that is good to inform our practices as we work to staff our
Sure,
schools.
that's insightful. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vladu.
Thank you, Dr. Vladu.
Thank you.
The school board is in need of a very quick 5-minute recess, and then we will come back and continue our portion of the meeting with the public comment. We are now in recess. I bring this meeting back to order. We move on with comments from citizens. This evening, we have 2 opportunities to speak. The first is for comments related to the American Rescue Plan ESSER 3 grant, and the second is for general topics. Before I open up for public comments, I will share some remarks that we share before every meeting's public comments. The school board provides a public comment period for the public to comment on topics germane to the business of the school board. The school board expects that each speaker will be courteous, modeling for our students how one can respectfully disagree with others' views. We ask that speakers address their comments to the entire school board and not one individual board member, superintendent, staff member, or audience member. Speakers will present their comments from the podium. Each speaker may speak up to 3 minutes. A timer is visible to speakers from the podium, and speakers should conclude their remarks when the red light comes on. The timer will begin after you state your name and address. Relating to the safety measures, we are providing individual sign-up sheets and pens for each speaker, and we ask that you speak loudly as the safety shield may muffle your voice, and it is your choice if you would like to take your mask off when you are speaking. As a reminder, as I shared earlier, to ensure that all those wishing to make a public comment can be heard and are allotted their full time, no outbursts, applause, or other disruptions will be permitted during the meeting. That includes here, York Hall, or in the overflow room downstairs. Should this rule be disregarded, I will provide a warning, and any further disruptions will result in the room being cleared. So we start with our public hearing on the American Rescue Plan ESSER 3 funds. Dr. Shandor, do you have any comments before we begin?
Yes, just one, Mr. Higginbotham. We're going to have Mr. Bill Bowen, our Chief Financial Officer. He has a few comments to share this evening before the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shandor. Chairman Higginbotham, members of the board, this is a public hearing this evening on the school division's American Rescue Plan ESSER 3 grant. It is a 3-year grant, provides just over $5.2 million. Our plan was presented in great detail earlier this evening by Dr. Stevenson and has also been posted on our website since early August. That's all I have to share with you, so with that, I invite the public to come and comment on our plan.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen.
I now open up the public hearing on the American Rescue Plan ESSER 3 grant. Our first speaker is Nicole Helmick.
Hello. My name is Nicole Helmick. I live at 300 Cockletown Road here in Yorktown, Virginia. This is my first time speaking here to the school board, but it's very important to me tonight. I am here tonight as a parent with 2 children in York County School Division. I would rather have the ESSER or the ESSER 3 grant money sent to programs that help with academic therapies for learning disabled children in the county. I would ask that the current plan be revised through more community input at this time. I have a child who is a high-level learner, and I also have a child who learns so differently that he needs special help. He is severely dyslexic. My child who is learning disabled was denied his first grade year the testing needed to get special ed services. I took responsibility and had him privately evaluated and now pay for private NILD educational therapy. The IEP was not established until the second quarter of his second grade year, which was last school year. Yes, COVID affected this process, but his needs should have been addressed from the school admin when I and his first grade teacher brought our concerns to the table at the end of the first quarter. More funding for quick, early detection, testing, and effective therapy for learning disabilities would be a good, sources from that grant would be great for children like my son. York County schools are successful because parents will be part of the education process for our children. I want my children to have all the opportunity to naturally be good at something or to work hard for something. I want YCSD to foster this opportunity as well through programs that allow for academic growth. Let our children excel if they can. Don't hold them back to establish equity. We've heard a lot of that word lately. My father is an immigrant from Peru. When he was 11 years old, he came to the United States. He came here, he didn't speak, read, write, or write English on his arrival. When he wanted to enter a special aeronautics program in his high school, He was told unless he could pass the reading test required for entry, he would not be accepted to that program. He didn't have access to a library or a tutor, so he would pick up littered newspaper on the subways and pay his older sister 25 cents each time she would help him better his reading skills. He was accepted into that high school. He was given incentive by a challenge, which encouraged him to work for something he dearly wanted. I want my children to have these opportunities in York County School Division. He is now a retired Army vet, has 2 bachelor's degrees, and at the age of 72 is a full-time working nurse. With optimism, determination, and hard work, he is a success.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hellman.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Carol Bauer.
Good evening, Chairman Higginbotham, school board members, Dr. Shandor, and community members. Thank you for this opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Carol Bauer. I reside at 314 Brook Lane. I'm a proud member of the York Education Association. The YEA has appreciated the opportunity to work with the administration to develop policies and practices that have helped our students and staff achieve great success. We appreciate the chance to provide input on the American Rescue Plan, ESSA Fund. Thank you, Dr. Stevenson, for your thorough presentation tonight. The YEA is asking that YCSD provide administrative leave for staff who must quarantine for COVID as allowed by the ESSA grant. We appreciate less quarantining might be needed this year, but because staff is being asked to be in close contact with students, most of which currently are not vaccinated, it is important that YCSD supports educators and not require the use of personal sick leave if quarantining is necessary. Another one of our requests is to use funds for community wraparound services. It was not a choice in the survey, but we feel the use of these funds for community schools and needed services would greatly benefit both students and York County as a whole. Community schools have a proven track record of improving learning outcomes. Additionally, we strongly support the mental health initiatives presented tonight in the ESSA presentation, and we encourage not only supporting all students, but also the YCSD staff. It is important that staff feel supported, and using funds to provide educator assistance is an important step in supporting loyal and hardworking YCSD staff who have done an outstanding job throughout this pandemic. Thank you for your attention to these comments, and I look forward to continuing to review the progress of this grant. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bauer. Our next speaker is Delois Stallman.
Good evening. I'd like to speak a little bit to the presentation that was delivered about the ESSER 3 plan.
If you could please state your name and address. I'm
sorry. Delois Stallman, 305 Chinkapin Orchard.
Thank you.
The number one item listed in the grant language is to address the students' academics. We heard a lot about almost everything but academics in the presentation. There was a lot of information about emotions and some stakeholder information that I was provided. I tried to obtain the direct questions that were asked and to whom they were available. I was directed to a website that cuts things off, but largely 2 of the 6 questions were asking people to identify who they were, and the other 4 seemingly were about the money. I think that the survey that I saw was available for 5 business days. It was posted on a couple of different websites. I think that was probably not the best way to get as much input as you might have wanted. With the people who responded largely had some family connection to a student, but you have the email and contact information of everybody in the school district, and I just can't understand why people weren't directly provided a link to the survey so that they could be afforded the opportunity to participate. In a lot of ways, you're trying to overcome some deficiencies or lack of learning that occurred in distance learning that you created last year in this body. Other states did not do that. Other states may not be facing some of the hurdles that the students here are facing as a result of their back to normal being already implemented. We're going to be, 80% of the country is in a masks optional scenario, 80% of the states. We are in the minority in the 20%. I think the kids would like to get back to normal. They would like an opportunity to play with their friends. I think that a lot of the focus on the grant and what was addressed was not on academics. And I read 300 and some comments by the family members who did take the time to type out something. The overwhelming thing that people want was more teachers, smaller class sizes, individual tutoring. And I just feel like you should really take a step and look again for community input. But according to the timeline, which this is going to be implemented in 1 week, it doesn't really seem like there's really any opportunity for this board to make any alterations at all to add a lot more academics to what was being proposed, which largely was not.
Thank you, Ms. Stahl. I will now close the public hearing on the American Rescue Plan ESSER 3 grant and open up public participation for comments of citizens. Our first speaker is Dalila Johnson.
Dalila Johnson, 216 Yorktown, Virginia. Good evening, members of the board and fellow York County residents. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. Leadership, knowledge, patience, and courage are some of the traits that this board requires when hiring a superintendent. During the last board meeting, August 3rd, that was exactly what our superintendent, Dr. Shandor, was doing by recommending this board the use of masks while at the YCSD schools. The safety of our students, staff, and community is and should be our priority. Every available mitigation tool should be used to stop the spread of COVID-19. On behalf of the York VEA, we would like to thank Dr. Shandor and his team at the school board office for his thorough research and well-supported recommendation. We also like to thank the members of this board who supported him on what we know was a very controversial decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Our next speaker is Sally Johnson.
My name is Sally Johnson, 3037 Hollies Drive in Yorktown. I'm here to address the board. I want to implore you to boldly push back against the mandates from the governor and the Department of Education of Virginia that are injurious to our students. The board boldly voted to make masks optional. I wish that you could find the strength within you to continue pushing back on that, because masks are severely injurious to our students. We've already had more than a year of COVID, which has resulted in such major academic, psychological, social development issues for our students. We're going to need way more than $5.2 million if our students are still wearing masks and continuing to decline in academics and in social and psychological development. Elementary school students need to see faces. They need to see the teachers and the students' lips. They need to hear voices that aren't muffled. What about children with special needs? They need to learn to interact with each other. Where do they learn their peer interaction? Middle and high school students desperately need social interaction with peers. We do have an epidemic. It's an epidemic of social isolation and loneliness, and it's only made worse by wearing masks. Students have difficulty concentrating due to headaches, dizziness, the distraction of the masks. We've already lowered our standards for our SOL scores last year. How low are we willing to go for our students? Some students are reporting anxiety, sleep problems, claustrophobia, panic attacks. We know that levels of depression and suicidal ideation are escalating in our students. Where is our compassion? Not to mention the medical issues with wearing a mask all day. Surely there are some mitigating factors that can be used to give breaks, to allow for situations where you can argue that within the guidelines, we could still get away with giving the students a break. This is just so rough on them academically, psychologically, and socially. And then on top of that, you have mandates such as gender identity, thinking about having to deal with going to bathrooms that may have members of the other biological sex in them, or having to use pronouns for students that are chosen by the students, taking away the parents' rights and allowing students to do things that are not even known, the parents aren't even notified. I just implore the board to use caution. Do what's right for the students.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Johnson.
you.
Our next speaker is Amanda Rochelier.
Amanda Rochlow, 607 Old Dominion Road. Good evening. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak, and thank you to the board for your service to our community. I have been a resident of York County for 17 years. I'm a mother of 2 recent graduates of York High, a current rising senior of York High, a wife to Kevin for 22 years, and most importantly, I'm a Christian. I believe that every child, regardless of their color of their skin, their gender, their socioeconomic status and ability, should be treated with the same respect, given the same opportunities, and be provided a safe learning environment while attending our publicly funded schools. Based on policy and procedures already in place and my own experience, York County is such a place. Tonight I'm here to voice my opposition to the passing and implementation of the transgender model policies being pushed down by the Virginia Department of Education. With that said, I have the following concerns. Parental rights. The model policy states that school would have the rights to hide information disclosed by students concerning gender identity. This oversteps and undermines the rights of parents to raise their children. It also is in complete conflict with the division's stated goal, and I quote, of fostering effective partnerships with families in our community and promote positive relationships between and among staff, students, and families. How can you meet the said goal if you are being deceptive with parents by withholding information and not allowing us to be fully involved? This also violates my family's religious freedoms and beliefs. If these policies are adopted into our school curriculums, gender will be defined as a spectrum, an ever-growing and evolving spectrum. Currently, families can opt their children out of family life if they choose to. If these new policies are adopted as non-discrimination, families will not be able to opt out of that curriculum. They will be mandatory and treated as accepted, and the information concerning gender will be normalized. As a Christian, my beliefs are not forced on the children in York County schools, but this policy asks that we all agree to the beliefs concerning gender set forth by this policy. If you don't agree with it, you will be labeled a bigot. My opposing beliefs do not make me or my family bigots. There are also the effects that this will have on teachers, sports, and I have no doubt that this list will grow if implemented. Teachers and school administration should be focusing on the education of our children and not pushing a radical ideology and social engineering agenda. Board members, you do not have to pass these policies. You do have a choice. Do not make the excuse that the General Assembly is making you pass this. You can say no, and with all due respect, we elected you to represent us, and this policy does not represent me or my family. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Linda Fairman.
Linda Fairman, 111 Galaxy Way. I've read through your plan, and critical race theory's ideology is being pushed using the terms trauma-informed practices, social-emotional learning, SEL under CASEL, diversity, equity, and inclusion. and spends $2 to $5 million hiring cognito trainers, resources, and supplies. Interesting name sounds like incognito, meaning having one's true identity concealed. Research reveals only indoctrination, labeling all whites, including children, as oppressors and all others as oppressed trauma victims. This is blatant racism. In this plan, teachers will now spend time learning how to psychoanalyze students for past trauma. Sorry, but you're not hired to do that. You're hired to teach academics. Schools are not mental health clinics. Are you prepared to handle liability for misdiagnosis and actions? Leave the mental health analysis and treatment to trained therapists selected by parents when needed. Social emotional learning isn't about positive handling of emotions. SEL was created by the Fetzer Institute, whose founder was a disciple of occultist Alice Bailey, founder of Lucifer Publishing, who was revered by domestic terrorist Bill Ayers. From Castle's site, quote, SEL is a lever for equity and social justice, supports anti-racist practices, how to dismantle inequity. It can be leveraged to help students assess power structures, to develop justice-oriented global citizens, unquote. Be aware. Equity is not equality, but a convoy system like World War II ship convoys, where all are forced to go at the slowest ship's pace, putting all at risk of failure and destruction. This doesn't teach students how to rise to a challenge, but to just sit at the bottom and wait for the bare minimum. Social justice is not blind justice under the rule of law, but revenge for past evils. Anti-racist isn't not being racist. One must be an activist to, quote, unhinge, disrupt, dismantle, and destroy all American institutions as they are systemically racist. If you don't, then you are labeled a racist. This teaches students to be activists for a particular political agenda. This plan has the structure that teaches students to label all based on race and lifestyle and view everything traditional and American as racist and evil that must be destroyed. There is no tolerance. All must do this or you will be called racist or phobic and silenced and destroyed. We're better than this. America's about uniting, not dividing and labeling. I strongly urge you to vote no on this indoctrination plan and spend the money on real teaching for children to succeed in academics, the arts, and sports to achieve their personal success. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fairman. Our next speaker is Sandra Tuminello.
Thank you, Board, for doing your job. It's a tough one. I'm Sandra Tuminello. I live at 138 Breezy Point Drive, Yorktown. Been in York County here for over 30 years. I've been a school guidance counselor and math teacher over 4 years. So I've been with students quite a bit, and I know a lot about the maneuverings of students, VEA, NNEA, and the likes. And I know that right now, people are just naturally very suspicious. And I felt pretty confident because I've talked with several of you today, and the program that you presented sounds like you really intend to not get in the trap that's being set across this country. This is a country, America, is based on Judeo-Christian values. That's why we're the best country in the world. And that's why so many people want to get here. But so many want to get here and then change it. And the radical Marxist communist ideology is really creeping in, and you can see it. And it seems so innocent. But now you see things such as drag queen story hour in public libraries. People in some states are not even wanting to require gender on a birth certificate because a child may change their mind at a later date. So that's going to totally do, Hallmark won't like that because that's going to do away with all the gender identity parties that people have. You know, let the kid wait till they're a teenager and decide the sex. It's just ridiculous. You just wonder where this thinking comes from, but it's straight from the pit of hell is where it comes from. They now say that and people are believing this, that there are over 20 sexes, that you're not born male or female. Well, yes, you are. God creates male and female, bottom line. And there are about 0.001% of individuals that maybe are born hermaphrodites, bisexual, very, very small percentage. And of course, those people need to be dealt with. All people, though, according to the Judeo-Christian beliefs, all people should be loved. All students should be nurtured and helped. Every student should be able to achieve at the best of their ability. We should not have to close the gap that's been pushed for the last 15 years, and I fought it tooth and nail in Newport News, because close the gap means the Caucasian scores can drop. And I say, no, let the minority scores be raised. So I just hope and pray that all of you will just not see that you will see any deception that creeps in, because it's going to happen. You look at our country right now, you see what's coming. And there are many people in this country who are being brought in intentionally to change the makeup of America and for it to no longer be a democratic republic, but a socialist, communist country. So I just pray that you'll fight to do your job.
Thank you, Ms. Tumanelli.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Caitlin O'Brien.
Hello, my name is Caitlin O'Brien. I am from 600 River Bend Court in Newport News, neighboring Newport News, but I'd like to speak on the transgender policy that has to be passed before a school year starts. Incidentally, I didn't get that statistic on intersex people formerly known as hermaphrodites, but they're about as common as people with red hair, actually, and they're not something to be dealt with. I'm here in part because of listening to the Newport News School Board, and I have been hearing some of these expressions of concern by parents that they personally must be informed of their children expressing any gender nonconformity. I can imagine from personal experience of my own childhood where this may lead, still remembering the screaming of my older siblings watching my father thrash the hell out of me with a belt when I was 6. If you haven't realized yet, being transgender was not something that could be beaten out of me. But this was not the end of my trauma related to having no one I could even speak to about it. When I was 13, I bought clothing at a local store. I was seen by an older person involved in my scout troop, who then intimidated me with that on a camping trip, used it to silence me, and molested me. I did not feel I could safely discuss feelings about my gender with any adults, and that was used to victimize me further. It is important to safety that children have someone whom they can actually confide in, but a lot of people, frankly, do not care about the safety of transgender or gender nonconforming children, who they constantly imply, as children, would use feminine expression just to prey on girls. It is not in keeping with statistics, yet transgender children are preyed upon all the time by an adult population which not only lacks understanding but constantly spreads fear and hatred through regular vilification in the media. Not everyone who says, quote, "I have done my research," end quote, is a subject matter expert when contradicting wide consensuses from epidemiologists for masks, or psychologists, sociologists, neurobiologists, endocrinologists, and pediatricians regarding ethical and safe policy in relation to transgender and gender nonconforming people in this country. No one in this room has any idea the trauma that I went through, that other transgender and gender nonconforming children will continue to be exposed to for failing to support protective measures for children who have been sexualized with these false scenarios constantly conjured up to attack these children for being different.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. O'Brien. Our next speaker is Robert Cook.
Good evening.
My name is Rob Cook. I'm from 104 Delacourt in Yorktown. I'm here to ask that the board not move forward with the changes to the policies regarding transgender students until the division has developed specific procedures for how these policies will be implemented. This policy change will impact all members of the school community. All stakeholders should have time to provide feedback on the new procedures for this policy change before it is moved forward for a vote. There are many questions regarding this new policy changes, such as how will teachers be trained to implement this new policy? Will parents be informed of a transgender student in their child's class in order for parents to have time to discuss this with their child beforehand? If my child is not comfortable using facilities with a transgender student, how will their concerns be addressed? We are focused a lot tonight on social and emotional well-being of our students, but we need to consider the impact of this policy change on all students, not just a few, before moving forward to implement this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Our next speaker is David Farrell.
David Farrell, 105 Clearbrook Landing, Grafton, Virginia. Superintendent Shander, Chair Higginbotham, members of the board, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. Sic semper tyrannis, thus always the tyrants. They're three simple Latin words that are packed full of meaning. Emblazoned on our flag is the response that this board should have when a tyrannical government like Governor Northam's uses unbalanced executive power to force its citizens to comply. Depicted on the flag is a woman of virtue vanquishing a fallen king. In such fashion should our local government act when the executive branch of the state has exceeded its limits. I believe Governor Northam and our health commissioner have done so. It is the responsibility of this board to respond not in a violent way, but in a defiant way, sending the message that tyranny has no place in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Board members, your authority is delegated authority from God, and as such, you should interpose when tyranny that defies our God-given rights rears its ugly head. The main issue I wish to address tonight is Virginia Code 22.1 to 23.3, which is a new law shoved in by our Democratic-controlled GA during the middle of a pandemic that forces local divisions to bow the knee to the God of the LGBTQ+ movement and forces students, staff, and faculty to go against their First Amendment right of freedom of religion. Not only that, but as written, the model document will allow for gender identity to be withheld from parents and allow a biological male to go to the women's restroom and vice versa. I know and love several students who are in York County schools, and I stand in here for their safety in this matter. Do not allow these students and friends of mine to have to undergo that. I also know Christian teachers who would not comply should they have to use pronouns contrary to a student's biological sex. We already have read stories of teachers who have resigned or been fired from Loudoun County for this very reason. This is tyranny, plain and simple. York County wants people with a backbone who will defy tyranny no matter the cost. Our county, our Commonwealth, and our nation were founded by men who did such. Christians like myself believe that God created man, male and female, in his image, and as such, to go along with this law would be to go against our faith, because acknowledging a lie contrary to biological truth is not only lying, but denying God's created order according to what he said in Genesis 2 and what Jesus repeated in Matthew 19. Furthermore, it is the parents' responsibility given to them by God to raise their children, not the state's. I believe that this goes against our First Amendment rights, and as such, I'm pleading with the board to not implement such policies and procedures in York County. I am thankful that it appears that York County has not succumbed and added to their policies and procedures as of right now, although I know it's being discussed tonight. Lastly, I want to plead to Christian parents who are able to pull your children out of public schools. It has been evident for many years that our government and our society has abandoned God and believes in a worldview that's contrary to Scripture. As Vodi Bakum said, we have to stop sending our children to Caesar and expect them to not come back as Romans. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Juan Yakisic.
Good evening. Thank you, members of the board, and thank you, Superintendent Shandor, for this opportunity. Unfortunately, I'm here to ask you to resign from your position.
I'm sorry, Mr. Yakisich, if you can state your address.
Juan Sebastián Yakisich, 112 Foundry Court.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I'm here to ask you for your resignation because you have violated your own code of conduct by protecting people from serious allegations, especially your staff member. And one of those is Dr. Shandor, who wrote a defamatory email full statement, and he didn't have the integrity and honor to defend his writing. That was 4 months ago. That's the main reason. You have done that several times. You have ignored my letter several times. I asked you for your resignation, and you never answer. Twice. So you don't have integrity to serve in this position. I'm asking you for your resignation. And the second motive is that you have been shown incompetency to handle this pandemic and prioritizing your own safety by hiring a legal counsel instead of medical advisor. That's what you did. So all of you are at risk just because you don't have the competency to deal with that. And I have asked Dr. Shandor many times to step forward and respond to his allegation, and he never did that. That is completely lack of integrity. So I'm asking for your resignation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yakisich. Our next speaker is Robin Field.
Thank you, Board, for having me speak here tonight. My name is Robin Field, 109 Chinaberry Way. I just want to break this down pretty basically. I just want to say that as a parent, a grandparent, and a professional, I would like to address CRT, transgender training. I believe you're calling it this evening on your meeting agenda, cultural responsive teaching and social and emotional learning. CRT, by any other name, is still critical race theory. There are many names, and if you as the board would do your own research instead of relying on information that is not correct, maybe we would get somewhere with what's going on. But nonetheless, it is my choice when, how, and if I teach my children about the people in this world who identify as a gender other than the gender they were born, or whether or not we have systemic racism in our society. I raise my own children knowing there are two sexes, male and female, and this is based on science, and to love and to be kind to one another. I don't tell them to be kind to the transsexual girl or the little black boy. That would be actually racist and bigoted speech for which hate culminates, which is what a lot of CRT is going to be planning in our children. My children have learned to judge someone based on their character, not their gender or sexual preference or color. I am to teach those values, not the school. It is my child and my responsibility to teach the value system that I think is best, not the school. If a child is not learning because you think his sexual identity is hindering him, that is a concern for the parents to seek professional counseling. Teachers are not qualified nor have the time necessary with such a complex issue as mental health. The percentage of gender dysphoria nationally is 0.06% according to the CDC. Revealing this information to the entire class is not only counterproductive to the rest of the population in school, but damaging to us as a society. It will give way to other students to question their identity of which they were secure in. We value and respect everyone, and we don't need to know how you identify sexually. Teachers are to teach reading, writing, math, science. If a child is having difficulty comprehending, maybe instead of blaming it on race or sexual orientation of that student, maybe the teacher should be better
Ms.
qualified
Field.
as a teacher to know how to
Ms.
teach
Field, your
that
time is out.
individual student in
Ms.
a
Field, you
different
need to
manner
stop talking. Your
to
time
help
is up.
them succeed.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lori Nardozzi.
Good evening, members of the school board. My name is Lori Nardozzi. Live at 105 Cypress Crossing here in Yorktown. Begin by thanking you for what you do. I have grandchildren here that attend 3 of the different schools in York County, and I'm here to ask that you vote against the transgender policy that's being pushed from the Virginia Department of Education, as it infringes on our constitutional rights. And I would like to say I have loved gay and transgender people in my own family. I'm not a bigot. I just believe God created male and female. I would never suggest that any transgender child did not have the same rights as other children. Every child should be loved and taught to succeed, and given the council, you already have discrimination laws and procedures and policies in place. However, any person's rights cease when they infringe on the rights of others, and that's where the line has to be drawn. This policy infringes on parental rights. It states that schools shall not notify the parents. That's already been gone over and discussed tonight. And it even goes so far as to call it abuse if the parent is not supportive of a child in their transgender choice, and that Child Protective Services be reported. Let parents teach their children moral issues, and please just stick to the academics. Parents have a right to make decisions concerning their children. And of course, then there's the inflammatory issues of bathrooms and locker rooms and overnight field trips and the accommodations for that when that comes up. Parents and grandparents do not want people of the opposite sex in private situations and private areas with their children. It violates the privacy rights of all the other children. I know you're trying to protect a class of people, but they're not a special protected class. They're people, and they have protected rights just like the rest of the children do. Please don't violate the rights of the rest of the children to protect a small percentage when you already have discrimination laws and policies and procedures in place. This gender expansive ideology not only would be imposed on the students, but on the teachers and the staff. You don't even know what the 8 modules of teaching curricula looks like. That would be forced on the staff and the teachers, and our teachers have enough on them already. The policy would compel other students and teachers to use another person's preferred name and pronouns, even requiring disciplinary action for a teacher who does not use the pronouns of a child's choice, regardless of how fluid that is.
Thank you, Ms. Nardozzi.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mary Kay Warren.
Good evening. I'm Mary Kay Warren, and I live at 113 Hudgens Farm Drive. Due to the mask mandate, social distancing mandate, the possibility of various social racial theories being taught, and the possible implementation of our children being forced to use the same bathrooms and locker rooms with the opposite sex, we have lost confidence in the school system, and we are choosing to remove our child from York County Public Schools. Instead, we are choosing to homeschool him. Although my husband works in Norfolk and my office is in Virginia Beach, we have made a family decision to move to York County and make this our home because we wanted our son to attend the best schools in Hampton Roads. But after the policies that Virginia has demanded you to implement, I am not confident any school in the Commonwealth is suitable for any of our children. If Northam can override your decision to make mask optional, can he not override any of your decisions? My husband and I both work full-time, and we know it's not going to be easy to teach our son, but with the mess our schools are being faced with, it will be worth it. If York County Public Schools decides to stand up to the tyranny being thrusted upon our children, we will revisit our decision and may decide to re-enroll our child in the future. And to any other parents, I welcome you to come follow me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Warren. Our next speaker is Mary Ellen Dixon.
Hello, Mary Ellen Dixon, 102 North Lakeland Crest. A couple of things. As you saw last meeting, my oldest son is autistic. He is high functioning. He was mainstreamed. So you turn around and you start, there's two different ages. There's an academic age and there is a social sexual age. A lot of our kids that are autistic are behind in the social sexual age. So you introducing all of these different sexes and different names and use of bathrooms and is going to endanger our kids. Our kids are most likely either going to be victimized or they're going to be predators. The male population of autistic men is very high on the sexual predator list because in school they're taught, go give a hug. That's your friend. My son was told to go into the girls' room, climb underneath the daggone thing by another sixth grader. You got middle school students, hormones are out the yin-yang. I mean, you can ask any middle school teacher. So now you're going to turn around and introduce all these other pronouns to them. You're going to confuse them even more. So now they're even in more danger to either be a victim or be a predator. That's one of the things. They're 7 times more likely to be sexual predators or victims, and that's the autistic kids. I'm not even talking about the rest of them. They're easily groomed. You could turn around and tell my son, hey, you don't have a girlfriend, so you are something else. He said, okay. And he's in college. So how are you going to turn around and address that? Is that part of your, what was it? Yes, that's ABC? Anyways, if that's not part of it to turn around and take care of the kids who are socially not capable of understanding that, it's not going to work. You're just going to turn around and have more problems. I also want to know why, we still haven't got an answer. I've written why we haven't got an answer about the mask mandate. The code is still in effect. It hasn't been passed to turn around and take these masks off of anybody 16 and over. It's still against the law. Class 6 felony versus a Class 1 misdemeanor. I'll take the Class 1 misdemeanor. Also, I want to know why the county itself is not doing this health check, not the school. The school, I mean, school's been hired to do education. The county's responsible for health. We have a conflict. The school cannot turn around and be doing health and education. County supervisors, General Assembly do the health. They're responsible for the health. Let's stop. Everybody go back to their jobs.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. The next speaker is Donna Dooley.
Good evening, Board. My name is Donna Dooley. I reside at 300 Fleming Way, Yorktown. I'm a transplant here to the Yorktown area. I came here from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, from one of the best school districts in this country. I moved here because this was the best school district on the peninsula. I'm the grandparent of 5 Virginia students, one of which is in Fairfax County. His parents have decided to leave the state and return to their prior residence. The other 4 grandchildren live here in York County. I supported them throughout the homeschooling time because I am a former mathematics teacher. I majored in math. I know what it's like to have to admit that a girl can do mathematics and be really good at it and set the curve. My concern this evening is the topic of cultural responsive teaching and social emotional learning. As a former educator, I've been watching CASEL for years, about 11 years since I retired from a professional career in finance after leaving the education system. The two topics covered tonight are not new to education, as they have been implemented in our schools for over 20 years across this country. CRT, SEL, whatever other acronyms, often result in confusion and divisiveness. This evening, I was impressed with explanation regarding CRT. However, I'm still uncomfortable. Culturally responsive teaching is rooted in that long-held belief that good teaching requires responding to each student's interest and knowledge. I call good teaching common sense, which is what I implemented in my classroom. The new twist is that it's essential to put cultural identity of people of color in the foreground. I'm the grandparent of a biracial child. His parents do not want him to feel oppressed or the oppressor. All children should feel their teachers value and respect their cultures, but good ideas in education have a history of getting transformed into practices that are quite different than what was originally intended. And unless people of color all fall in one box, a teacher cannot tailor instruction to that array of cultures.
Thank you, Ms. Dooley. Next speaker is Kenneth Green.
My name is Kenneth Green. I reside at 714 Dandy Loop Road in Yorktown. Second meeting I've been to, and it's really obvious to see who's the elected officials and who are the paid employees of this county. I encourage those that are elected to know your constituents and to know how they feel and to abide by that constituency that you represent. Two hot topics. I find it ironic that CRT, the culturally responsive teaching, mimics critical race theory. What seems to be similar in the two is equity. Whenever equity comes up, equity is not equality, and equality is not equity. When you start pushing at equity, you lose performance. You will lose performance. And I think sometimes when we accentuate what makes us different, I think it pulls us apart. I'm a father of three, a family of five. We have three of us are brown-eyed and two of us are blue-eyed. Now, this sounds crazy. Got 2 minutes left here. Let's get through this real quick. So we started really playing it up in the house, who had the light-colored eyes and who had the dark-colored eyes. It got crazy. I had to actually put my foot down and say, we are no longer going to talk about eye color, because it was like pulling us apart. It sounds crazy, but we are a Green family, last name Green. And so we just had to say, no more talk about eye color. When you accentuate what makes us different, it does pull us apart. I would encourage y'all to be about education. The idea that I've got 2 daughters and 1 young son. They'll both be at Seaford Elementary this year, 2nd, 3rd, and 5th grader. I am not a fan of this whole transgender thing. I am, let's use the right term, I'm cisgender. I am binary, I'm traditional. You got genitalia. We all are grown-ups here. And that's the thing. We want to be grown-ups in the room. You know, when you feed these young kids and you pander to their confusion, you are selling them a lie that that is going to pester them for the rest of their life. Why do you think that there's such high depression or suicide rate with these young people? That needs to be addressed, but it's because this world, and if y'all do this, you will be selling them a lie that they will not. You're selling them a lie that that they can be something that they genetically can't be. You cannot change the DNA. You can cut parts off, you can glue parts on. You can do whatever, but you cannot change the DNA of a man or a woman. And when you try to sell that to somebody that's already confused at a young age, that they say a lot of times they work themselves out of, you're going to do them a real disservice, and you may be leading them down a high rate of suicide. The statistics are out there. So I encourage you to do what's right. Think about the cisgender, as I like to correctly say it, the binary people, because if this goes the wrong way, we may have to decide what we're going to do, because I need to trust y'all to do right by my children. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Green. Those are all of the comment cards we had filled out prior to the meeting. Is there any that I missed? Okay, then I will now close the public participation for comments of citizens. Moving on to our next agenda item is matters by board members. Ms. Geraltz, would you mind starting for us?
Sure, I'd love to. Usually we use this time to kind of share how we've been out in the school community and the greater community, as that's one of our responsibilities as elected board members. But I'm going to save that for a minute. The last couple weeks have been really eye-opening to me as a member of this community. Recently, we've had to have a lot of discussions about divisive topics. And I know that our last meeting, not all of us agreed. And we did it respectfully. We didn't call names. We didn't point fingers. We didn't send nasty emails. We didn't post on social media. We didn't put our addresses out there for people to make visits. We got up from that last meeting, and we still laughed together and respected each other, even though we had a different opinion. And I'm really concerned that as a community, we're losing the ability to have civil discourse. It's okay to disagree with people. You can do it with respect, and you can certainly do it with kindness. And I think no matter whether people believed or liked what we did at the last meeting, I'm proud of how we handled that with respect for one another, and we were able to move forward and still have conversations, and again, be able to work with each other and still be colleagues. And so I think that's just a good example for how the community needs to work together. I think as we move forward, these divisive topics are not going to go away, but I know for me, we've got kids starting school next week, and I went to visit all the new admin teams at all the schools in District 3, sorry. And they are working their tails off. They're getting ready for their teachers to come back in the building. They're getting ready for the kids to come back in the building. They're figuring out what are the exact ways that I've got to figure out what has happened with the kids, not just on an academic level, but on a mental health level, because they have to deal with the entire child. You can't pick and choose when the kids come into your building. You have to meet them where they are in all of those different ways. And then this week, the teachers coming back, all figuring out how they're going to do their classrooms, how am I going to figure out what my kids need when they come in the building, and all of those divisive topics will be dropped because they're going to focus on what needs to be done with the kids. That's what the principals are doing. They are so excited to have kids in the building. They don't care what masks are happening. They don't care about any of the topics in the community. They're going to do the right thing by our kids. And so I know for me, I'm going to move on from these divisive topics after we have this meeting. I'm going to put my full weight of support behind our teachers and our staff members and our administrators, because that's what they need moving forward. They really need to be able to focus on what's the most important and getting these kiddos back in the building, and trying to get them as much back to normal as we possibly can. So I know that was long-winded, I apologize, but that's been on my heart for a couple weeks, so thank you.
No, that's great, thank you. Mr. Myatt.
Oh, yeah, sure. I had a couple of highlights here. One in particular, I wanted to again congratulate the Tab High School marketing team, and that's Christina, Micah, and Lynn Pritchard for their leadership with an enduring marketing program that, again, was awarded the VDOE Region 2 winner for the 2021 Grading Excellence Program. Like I said, enduring, 20 years, and I think as many, I was mentioned 1,000 children or students who have passed through that program. So again, wanted to pass on my personal congratulations and thanks to them. I'm looking forward to, again, school visits. We have some open houses here the latter part of this week, and then we'll get into the elementary, middle, and high schools over the next couple of weeks. Looking very much forward to that. Going to visit a couple of sports teams, see how that new football coach is doing at Tab. And that's always just an extension of the classroom, whether it's volleyball or football, whatever it might be, field hockey. Get out and observe practice and the dynamic between coach and athletes. And then one other final note, you know, again, we're going to introduce our students and children back in-person instruction, and keeping, the real goal is to obviously keep them in the building, if you will, this fall. And it's going to take, as we all know, the combined effort of all of us, students, parents, faculty, and frankly, community members to do this. And hopefully we'll push through this wave, and maybe even return here in the coming weeks back to a baseline that we saw in June and July. And I have confidence as a county that we'll do that, and we're all very much looking forward to the changing dynamic as we move through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Myatt. Mr. Schaefer.
Oh, thank you. Well, I can tell you that I'm looking forward to Wednesday and Thursday when we have open houses at my schools. I was able to go visit every school today because I wanted to hit them before kids got in there. And it was very nice. The teachers are so excited to have kids back in 5 days a week, even if it is with masks right now. And as soon as that mandate is lifted and we truly go back to normal, it's going to be awesome. The progress in the schools, I mean, the electricity that the teachers have of just looking forward to it, and I'm talking about not only the ones that are brand new, because I met some newbies today, but even the ones that have been around forever are energized at having the kids back. I had one teacher at the high school today at Bruton that was there with a yardstick, measuring out the tables, making sure that they would have the adequate social distance so that kids could be, his 29 kids in his class could be seated correctly. And it was just those kind of things that set us apart. We do have the excellent teachers, the excellent paras, the excellent administrators that allow the teachers to teach. A lot of the stuff that we were talking about tonight is not really issues. The transgender thing we've had a policy around since 2013, I think it is, and was revisited in 2017. And I mean, essentially, we respect every student, every kid, and we are not going to push on them beliefs that are contrary to what we should be. My wife is a teacher. We are very much in tune with what goes on with kids. And I tell you that when you're teaching first grade and you're having to teach them to read, it is a very tough thing. And this past year was not easy. But once they got the kids in the building last year, it helped. And now they're going back 5 days a week. I think that you will see things just go wonderful for quite a while. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Vice Chair, Ms. Gerolds, I really echo your comments that you made at the beginning, so thank you for that. It's been difficult, and we're working through it as a community, so that's what we're going to continue to do. And I want the teachers to know we're going back to school next week. We support you. We're there for you. It's all about we're here for the kids, so we want to support the teachers. But I do want to mention that I went to the Leadership Academy earlier on this month in August. And that was a great program. It was a great speaker that came in and spoke. And one of his comments he made, he gave a statistic about over 40-something% of our young people aged 22 to 32 are still living at home without a full-time job. They don't want to work full-time. They want to work 3 days or 3 weeks, and then they want a week off. They're being supported at home. They don't need to work. And that's part of our problem with getting workers, not just teachers, but any workers all across the country. Interesting statistic he provided there. I haven't researched it to look it up, to look at it anymore. I took him for his word at it, but I do know we're in a crunch for getting teachers and bus drivers and everybody, but it's not just in the school division. It's all across Virginia in any job that we're having that with. But I did attend new teacher orientation. I was surprised that of the new teachers, I knew about 6 of them. Ironically, either through prior work experiences, or they were with other divisions and came back to us, and I knew them when they were younger as children and grew up, became teachers, and now they've come over to us in York County. So that was great to see those new teachers and the excitement, and that they're ready to get in, they're ready to teach our kids. So thank you.
Thank you. I do very quickly want to take this time and wish a happy birthday to Mr. Schaefer for your birthday. I scheduled a meeting, so sorry.
No place I'd rather be.
Right. Hope your wife didn't hear that one. Usually this time of year, this is when I start talking about teachers make an impact. And I said this, I had a chance to go to the new teacher orientation and the new teacher academy and leadership academy. And I mentioned teachers don't just prepare for the school year. They're preparing their classroom to make an impact for every student that's in the classroom. And the preparation they make now, it leads them to the type and how much and how long that impact can go. And I've had teachers throughout my life as I grew up, from elementary school through middle school, that I still think about some of the lessons that they taught me and experiences I had in their classes. And I just want to remind everybody, as the kids are getting back to go in the building, they might not act like they're excited, but deep down, I think they're ready for a 5-day-a-week schedule where they have to get up at the same time, each day, go out, catch the bus, or get a ride to school, and they're looking for that sense of normalcy. And once they get back into the classroom, whether it's with masks or not with masks, they're with their friends, they're with their teachers, and we have that we can focus on. And so as we keep going and we push that idea that we are creating an impact for the students, I think the focus just needs to remain on that idea. And I just want to echo the comments that my fellow board members said. And we heard lots of different ideas and thoughts and opinions tonight in the public comment. And I was very pleased in how everybody was very respectful for everyone, whether you might have agreed with something that was said or was not said. Everyone had their time and the respect. And that's something I wish that we can continue to see, and that we can work together to do everything we can for the best opportunities for our students here in York County and beyond. But that's all I wanted to share. Just wanted to say one more time, good luck to all of the staff here in YCSD. Doesn't matter what you do, you make an impact and you make a difference, and thank you. So now we get to move on to our financial matters, and I will ask Ms. Geralds to discuss those at this time.
This is always the most important part of the meeting, most exciting.
Mr. Bowen would agree.
Yes. Mr. Chair, we have consideration of approval of claims certified for payment for the months of June and July 2021. Significant expenditures for June. Instructional-related expenditures totaling approximately $376,200 and include payments to New Horizons, Discovery Education, Christopher Garris, James McMillan, Lego Education, Pasco Scientific, Traco Ed, Voyager Sopris, William & Mary. Payments for technology-related items totaled approximately $1.88 million and included payments to CDW, JP Morgan Chase, Schick, Cox Communications, Inflow Communication, and Virginia Business Systems. Payments for food service totaled $315,800 and were made to Sodexo for May and June for food service operations. Payments related to construction and maintenance projects totaled approximately $319,000 and include payments to RRMM Architects for design work on Seaford Elementary, Heartland, $93,300 for work at the Grafton Complex, the carpentry and painting experts, and Centennial Contractors. Payments for administration total approximately $245,600 and include payments to Comerica for the OPEB Trust Fund, Virginia School Boards Association, and VACORP. Payments for operations totaled $223,900 and includes payments to American Paper, Dominion Energy, James River Audio Visual, McCarthy Tire. There was one payment for transportation was made to Kingmore Supply totaling $14,000 for bus cameras, and that was funded by a state grant. Significant expenditures for July. Payments related to instruction totaled approximately $102,900 and include payments to Instructure, Blackboard, and Seesaw Learning. Payments related to IT totaled $172,300, include payments to X2 Development, E-Plus Technologies, Tyler Technologies, and Cox Communications. Payments related to administration totaled $505,300 and included payments to the Virginia Risk Sharing Association, AON Consulting, and National Association of Federally Impacted Schools. Payments related to construction and maintenance projects totaled $188,300 and include payments to Centennial Contractors and Via Design Architect. We also have consideration of approval of financial reports for July 2021. Significant changes related to the operating budget. For July revenues, there were no significant changes in revenue for July 2021 when compared to July 2020. For expenditures for transportation have increased by approximately $100,000 to prepare buses for the 21-22 school year. IT expenditures have decreased by about $173,000 from July 2020, as fewer computer devices have been purchased for the 21-22 school year. Significant changes relating to the food service budget. For revenues and expenditures, there are no significant changes in revenue or expenses in the food service budget. We also have a consideration of approval of Resolution 21-35. Resolution 21-35 requires the board's approval, authorizing procurements of more than $50,000. There are 7 items on the resolution. The details can be viewed on board docs. Mr. Chair, I now move to approve financial matters as listed.
I second that motion.
Thank you very much. Ms. Ford, we have a motion and a second.
Yes, a motion was made by Mrs. Geralds and seconded by Mr. Richardson to approve financial matters as listed. Board members, you may cast your vote. Ms. Geralds?
It's not giving me the option.
Okay, I'm going to go
Yes.
ahead and mark you yay, and the board passed this financial matters 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. Next on our agenda is our consent calendar, and I'll go over this list briefly. The board has had the opportunity to view this more in depth. I'm just going over sort of what the items are. So on our consent calendar this evening are approval of personnel actions, approval of donations in the amount of $23,615.41, approval of Resolution 21-36, which is a resolution declaring its intention to reimburse itself from the proceeds of one or more grants made by the Commonwealth of Virginia for certain expenditures made and/or to be made in connection with certain capital improvements. We also have the approval of fiscal year 2023 proposed budget calendar. That is the calendar, not the actual budget, in case anyone was confused. Approval of health insurance, our third-rate plans. Approval of minutes from our special meeting and work session on June 7th, 2021, special meetings on June 14th and June 29th, 2021, and August 4th, 2021. And finally, approval of agreement of a lease with Foundations Church. So with that mentioned, we would need a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar as listed.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the consent calendar as listed.
And I'll second that.
Ms. Ford, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar as listed.
Yes, the motion was made by Mr. Myatt and seconded by Mr. Richardson to approve the consent calendar as listed. You may cast your vote. Ms. Geralds?
Yes.
The motion passed 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. Next, we move on to our action items. Our first action item is consideration of approval of the ARP ESSER 3 grant application. Dr. Shandor.
Thank you, Mr. Higginbotham. Mr. Bowen is going to come to the podium and share just a little more information about the ESSER 3 grant application.
Thank you, Dr. Shandor, Chairman Higginbotham, members of the board. The actual application for the ESSER 3 grant is due September 1st. Staff has presented the school division's plan for the ESSER American Rescue Plan ESSER 3 grant. The public has provided its input through a survey process and also through the public input for this evening. And at this time, staff does recommend approval of the plan.
Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I'd just like to make one comment, because I know one of the public comments, unfortunately, didn't believe we were targeting academics, but I think we are anyway. We have tutoring that's targeted and personalized. We have after-school enrichment programs, summer enrichment programs, and trying to address the unfinished learning. Over half of the grant is going toward unfinished learning, $2.6 million. Summer Academy, additional gifted staffed, LETRS, which was the acronym was used, e-tutoring, intervention coaches, EL coaches, speech language pathologists, for those students that have fallen behind academically. That's what that money's for. And this isn't the only ESSER grant we've had. It's called ESSER 3 because we've had several before this.
That's correct. This is the third round of ESSER grants. We just started spending our ESSER 2 grant this summer with Summer Academy.
Exactly.
And again, the budgets that we built are really just a framework. There will be, as Dr. Stevenson presented, there are a number of programs that involve hiring staff. And from the report we saw from Dr. Vladu this evening, we're having some challenges hiring staff. So where those funds go unspent in staff, they will be reprogrammed. And we'll bring those funds back to the board to be reprogrammed at a later time.
Right, and we did a lot with our summer enrichment this past Summer Academy. We're trying to catch those students up that have, that may have fallen behind.
Correct.
Perfect.
Mr. Bowen, I have a question. There was a question earlier about how we provided the survey for community input for the ESSER 3 funds. How did we send that out, or how did we ask to get feedback from the community?
I can answer that.
Okay.
Ms. Goff is here, she can come to the podium if she has anything to add. We did send those out via email. I believe over 17,000 emails that went out. 15,600 of those emails were accepted. So if folks didn't receive that email, that means they're not in the system for us to send to them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. With that, if there's no other discussion, I move approval of the ESSER 3 grant.
Second.
Ms. Ford, we have a motion to approve the ESSER 3 grant application from Mr. Richardson, and Ms. Geralt, second.
Yes. A motion is made by Mr. Richardson and seconded by Mrs. Geralt to approve the ESSER 3 grant application. Board members, you may cast your vote. And I'll mark Mrs. Geralt's. The motion passed five.
Yes.
Yes, the motion passed 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. Next on our action items is consideration of approval of the fiscal year 22 pay plan update. Dr. Shandor.
Thank you, Mr. Higginbotham. Dr. Vladu is going to share some additional updates to the FY22 pay plan. Dr. Vladu?
Mr. Higginbotham, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor, tonight I bring you two updates to the pay plan. The first update is regarding our virtual high school pair educators. So as you'll remember, about 4 weeks ago, we received a request from the Department of Instruction to evaluate the pair educator for the virtual high school position. This position does serve students enrolled in Virtual Virginia and Virtual High School. And as you may know, that this position may have responsibility, often has responsibility outside of the school day in contacting parents, as well as serving as a liaison and the coordinator between Virtual High School as well as the parents. So we conducted a review, and based on that review, in our comparative market, we're making several recommendations regarding this position. First, we want to change the name from the virtual pair educator or pair educator virtual high school to an instructional associate to denote the instructional mentorship and parent communication that is required after hours for employees in this position. Second, we're recommending that this position is changed from grade 8 and 9 to grade 9 and 10 to account for the additional responsibilities. Third, we recommend the increase in the number of days for this position from 183 days to 185. For instance, these individuals, these staff members will be there for back to school night, so parents can get to know them and have build that relationship that's essential to that students being successful. And fourth, for this position, we're recommending to increase the hours per day from 7 hours to 7.5 hours per day. The second update that we have in regards recommendation to the pay plan is at last month's meeting, I brought before you the regrading of the health service professionals. And at that time, they were regraded, and when we regrade a position, often or sometimes it happens that we create some compression, and that compression that resulted was for the coordinator of health services. So what we're doing is recommending increase it from grade 24 to grade 25 for the coordinator of health services to deal with the compression that was created when we brought up our health services professionals who are school nurses up to grade 24. So those are the two recommendations that we bring before you tonight.
Any questions from any board members?
Pretty straightforward, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vladu.
Thank you.
So we will need a motion and a second to approve the fiscal year 22 pay plan update.
I move for approval of the FY '22 pay plan update.
I'll second.
Ms. Ford, we have a motion and a second to approve the fiscal year 22 pay plan update.
A motion was made by Mrs. Geralds and seconded by Mr. Schaefer to approve the FY '22 pay plan update. You may cast your votes, board members. The motion passed 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ford. Next on our agenda, we move to policy discussion. The first policy discussion is the equal educational opportunities, non-discrimination of the York County School Board. Dr. Shandor.
Thank you, Mr. Higginbotham and board members. Dr. Aaron Butler is going to make his way to the podium. He's our Director of School Administration. He's going to provide information related to Policy JB as well as Policy JO. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Butler.
Mr. Higginbotham, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor. Before you tonight are proposed revisions to School Board Policies JB and JO. These revisions are based on several legal mandates that amended the Code of Virginia. During its 2020 legislative session, the General Assembly passed House Bill 145 and Senate Bill 161. These two pieces of legislation amended the Code of Virginia and directed the Virginia Department of Education to develop model policies on the treatment of transgender students. Section 22.1-23.3 of the Code requires local school boards to adopt policies consistent with the model guidance. The Code directed the Virginia Department of Education to address several domains in the model policy. Tonight, through this presentation, I will address all of the domains enumerated in the Code and review the areas where current school board policies are in compliance with state regulations. I will also provide an overview and rationale for the proposed revisions to Policy JO, which is student records, and Policy JB, equal education opportunities, non-discrimination. In addition to revisions to the Code of Virginia, the United States Supreme Court upheld a ruling of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit in the Grimm versus Gloucester County School Board case. The court held that individuals are allowed to use the restroom of their identified gender rather than their biological sex at birth. In clarifying gender identity, it is based on a person's deeply held knowledge of their own gender. The U.S. Court of Appeals and the Virginia Department of Education model policy parallel each other in defining gender identity not as a casual declaration, but as a sincerely held and consistent belief in one's identity. Several school board policies already place the division in compliance with the Code of Virginia requirements. For the non-discrimination laws domain, Policy GBA, JFHA, prohibition against harassment and retaliation includes sexual orientation and gender identity as protected groups, placing the division in compliance. For the maintenance of a safe and supportive learning environment, prevention of and response to bullying and harassment domain, Policy GBA, JFHA delineates procedures for addressing harassment. Policy JFC, specifically the Code of Conduct in the Student Handbook, addresses the prevention and response to bullying behaviors in school. And Policy GCL requires annual training of staff, including the appropriate response to bullying allegations. For the maintenance of student records, Policy JO requires division staff to maintain accurate and complete records for every student. This language parallels the Virginia Department of Education model policy. For the enforcement of sex-based dress codes, the student handbook was revised in the 2019-2020 school year to align with Section 22.1-279.6 of the Code of Virginia. This particular section requires school division dress and grooming standards to be gender neutral. The current student dress code aligns with the guidelines provided in the model policy and in alignment with the Code of Virginia. For the identification of students and protection of student privacy, Policy JO requires staff to maintain confidentiality standards related to students' identifying information. In addition, policy IJ, guidance and counseling program, requires school counselors to keep personal and social information not a part of a student's educational records confidential. These policies comply with the standards of confidentiality as well as the Code of Virginia. For student participation in sex-specific school activities, events, and facilities, policy JFCB, sportsmanship, ethics, and integrity, requires school athletic programs to comply with all Virginia High School League regulations. The Department of Education model policy deferred to the Virginia High School League for all matters related to athletics and competitions. Our current policy and practices align with all Virginia High School League regulations. To be in compliance with state code requirements, the following revisions have been rendered. For the non-discrimination law domain, policy JB has been revised to add the words sexual orientation and gender identity. This will allow policy JB to mirror the language already in policy GBA JFHA. For the identification of students, policy JO has been revised to add language stating that students and staff shall be referred to by their preferred name and gender, but school official records will reflect the name and gender assigned at birth, aligned to government-issued documentation. For student participation in sex-specific activities, events, and school facilities, policy JB was revised to state that no student shall be denied equal access to clubs, organizations, events, all facilities, programs, activities, services, or benefits. This revision will allow code compliance. Historically, division staff has consistently handled student-specific matters on a case-by-case basis. For the implementation of any policy related to students, staff will continue this practice of reviewing cases on an individual basis to ensure student privacy and confidentiality are followed. This concludes my presentation of revisions for policy JB and JO. Following board discussion, the recommendation is to bring this item back for a second reading at the next meeting of the board. I'm available for questions at this time.
Dr. Butler, you mentioned before that schools have been dealing with this on a case-by-case basis in the past. So this is issues and situations have come up recently and farther back in the past in the last 5, 10, 15 years?
Yes, sir. Most recently, but then even further back, since I've been administrator in the division, these are things that have been historically things that we've always dealt with on a case-by-case basis, working with families, working with students, our school administrators, and our school counselors.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board?
And Dr. Butler, in working with these families, I guess we've just made accommodations, is what we've made, and what's been reasonable, and we've had no issues that I'm aware of.
Yes, sir. We've never taken a blanket approach. We've always, again, looked at the needs of the student, looked at the needs of the family and the school, and we've worked with families and students to make sure we had a safe environment that was discrimination-free.
So we're not taking the VDOE model policy and saying, this is what we're going to do verbatim, stick by stick. We've already adjusted our policies to work with families and that sort of thing, and we're in compliance with the state, with the standards, with the only exception of these two changes that we have to make in JB and JO, correct? Am I right in saying that? Because we've already made the other changes over the last several years.
Yes, sir. We're required just to be consistent with the policy, so you don't have to accept all of the model guidance, but you just have to make sure your policies are consistent with the model policy.
Yeah, I think there's 4 or 5 bullets that they said we needed to be in compliance with for the rulings with the federal government, which we've done. So, okay, that's all I have for right now. I've been asking questions all along through calling Dr. Shandor and that sort of thing over the last several weeks and months. So I may have some more later, but that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Yeah, what it does is it gives us wide latitude, and that's always the goal of any organization, and to manage as such, you know, within the boundaries of the law. But we want wide latitude.
So one of the things that was in one of the policies was just students can kind of pick the name they want to be called in school, and that actually encompasses more than trans students. It actually encompasses, I know growing up, I had a stepdad, I wanted to have his last name, but I wasn't adopted, and so I know in school, that's the name I wanted to be called. And I know we have a lot of kids who are in that similar situation. So I think it's good that we have that in there just for any kind of circumstance where a kid says, this isn't the name that I'd like to be called in school. So, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much, Dr. Butler.
Thank you.
We do not have anything on our agenda for our first reading and second reading, so we'll move right to the report of the superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Higginbotham. I have a number of items just to tackle this evening. First, as a few board members mentioned earlier, we did have Leadership Academy. It's our annual 3-day Leadership Academy that included over 110 leaders in the York County School Division. We had principals, assistant principals, testing coordinators from each school, along with central office staff. Mr. Richardson did mention that we had a general session which included a keynote speaker. His name was Mr. Garrison Wynn. He spoke about resilient leadership and leading with direct intention and purpose. He was also pretty funny, and he was sort of a comedian that picked on Mr. Richardson and Mr. Higginbotham, and staff certainly enjoyed that.
Don't sit on the front row.
Yeah, never sit in the front row. Also, we had a board member, YCSD parent, and student basically present a testimony about the impact of our teachers and leaders during the pandemic school year. And Ms. Geralt, you did a great job that day sharing your story. We certainly appreciate that. And praising all of the staff members and all of their work. During that 3 days, our team engaged in professional development on a variety of topics, including addressing unfinished learning, innovative instructional resources, performance and operational management, finance and budget guidance, as well as collaborative sessions focused on strategic plan goals. Again, we also had a special education leaders academy on August 10th, again with principals, assistant principals, student services staff, ACCs and ACIs came together to prepare for leading special education in their schools. Jason Ballum from Sands Anderson Law Firm was first on the agenda to share findings from the JLARC study on special education in Virginia and the implications for leading special education. Student services staff then facilitated learning on pre-referral strategies for students with behavior and communication support needs. Participants also explored the Student Services Handbook, and special program administrators reviewed the new manuals for each program. We also had a Transportation Academy, which was held August 18th, Bruton High School from 8:30 to 3. Approximately 119 employees attended the Transportation Safety and Safe Schools training. Today and tomorrow, division teachers and staff are participating in division-wide professional development provided by our division's instructional and operations personnel. Let's see, we also welcomed 114 new teachers at New Teacher Orientation, which was mentioned this evening by some of our board members. We appreciate you attending that, welcoming them to the school division. We also, as Dr. Vladu has been sharing at multiple board meetings, talking about our non-licensed job fairs at Grafton Middle School and Magruder Elementary School for the purpose of hiring and recruiting custodial and transportation and non-licensed instructional openings. But last but certainly not least, I want to make sure we thank our custodians for their hard work this summer. They take great pride in doing excellent work as they clean and prepare our buildings for returning our students and staff. Their attention to detail, along with their commitment to service, is vital to our school division, and their work is greatly appreciated. So in just 1 week, we'll welcome back returning and new students, and we look forward to a great school year. This concludes the superintendent's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shandor. I just want to, one more time, thank everyone who gave a presentation today from the YCSD staff, and for all the members of the public who came to address the board. We appreciate all comments, and we appreciate the time. And for everyone who's called or emailed us, who might still be watching us with us at home 3 hours later, I appreciate you guys too. I just want to thank everyone for the thoughts and the sharing of your opinions and your experiences. It's been tough to hear so much stuff, but it has been a learning experience, and I look forward to continuing to learn and grow that way. But we are in need of 2 closed sessions, so I will ask a board member to take us into our first one relating to personnel matters.
So, Mr. Chair, I move that the York County School Board convene in closed session to discuss personnel matters relating to specific employees pursuant to the personnel exemption, Section 2.2-3711A, 1, the Virginia Freedom of Information Act.
I will second.
Okay, Ms. Ford, we have a motion and a second.
Yes, the motion was made by Mr. Richardson and seconded by Mr. Schaefer for the school board to meet in closed session to discuss personnel matters. Board members, you may cast your vote.
I'm kicked out again, sorry.
Okay, Mark, you,
I vote yes.
okay. The motion passed 5-0. The board is now in closed session.
As a reminder, our next work session will be held here at York Hall on Monday, September 13th at 6 p.m. Thank you and have a great week. We are now in closed session.